Manhwa begins with a little chaos caused by this young man who pinned the girl against the wall. Judging by his face and generally shabby appearance, he is just furiously furious. But this brave girl withstands his insane gaze, because this is not the first time it has happened to her. She tries to calm him down, and she succeeds, because this mad dog, as if powerless, fell into her arms. The main character congratulated her ward on the fact that this time he calmed down a little faster than last time. But enough time had passed and he was still standing too close, so the girl hurried to push him away from her. This guy is similar in his behavior to a dog, as for example, now he is comparable to a sad dog who was pushed away by his owner. As our heroine knows, this dog cannot directly say what he wants, so she asks it herself. In response, he pulls the girl closer to him and at the same time with a little difficulty pronounces his desire for her to be near. Diarine sighs heavily at the thought that with such an approach, a secular debut will not await them anytime soon. But despite this, she still hugs the guy and calms him down, patting him lightly on the back. In the further narration, the heroine explains that all her suffering began when she took on one task. Now the girl is standing in front of the table of the high priest, the main head of the temple to which Diarine belongs. In the entire system and hierarchy of this temple, the girl is just an ordinary priest, and in the distant past, she rejoiced in this honor. But over the years of service, she began to suffer, and for 7 years without the connections of her parents, she worked like a slave. The high priest began her opening speech about how Diarine had overcome difficulties and grown up beautifully. Despite her hard slave life, the girl maintains her politeness and asks how she can help the leader. Diarine is a commoner, so as a person without connections, she gets the most difficult job, and there is no way to get promoted. The leader considers her a real professional priest, and the girl is already ready to listen to the task that will be dumped on her. And she is given a job to help people suffering from the consequences of the war in adapting to society. Diarine holds back her inner scream, thinking that she will not be able to cope because she is a simple priest who knows nothing about war and battles. She has already been to the battlefields twice, so the high priest believes that the young lady is already used to this. But the girl is not happy with this situation, and according to the woman, these people need God's help. Diarine was at war, so she knows how this disaster breaks the psyche of people, and in this case it is the job of the priests to heal the wounded bodies and souls of soldiers. The heroine herself would gladly accept God's help, because the case in which she is being dragged is very serious. The manager tries to smooth out the corners, explaining that this is just helping those in dire need. But if the girl loses her life, she will find eternal peace in the arms of God. That is, no one will worry about her. In this case, she has no choice, so she takes the chance and is interested in the reward for her work. The high priest maintains his friendly look and thinks about the answer, because it will also not be good if the girl runs away. If the manager wants her to risk her life, she must offer a real, concrete reward. According to the rules, priests cannot receive money in person, and this did not bother the girl before, since it was the norm in the temple, and she was brought up this way. But after she was in the war, her opinion changed. There is no point in living at the bottom and straining in vain, because no one will appreciate your efforts. So Diarine decided that she wouldn't be so naive anymore, and if anything, quit here, no matter what she was told. In the meantime, the manager found an answer. She had been watching the girl's abilities for a long time and appreciated them. Therefore, in case of successful work, the center and the high priests recognize its achievements. At this point, the heroine's eyes lit up because she had a chance to move to a high position. She gladly agrees to such conditions, promises to be obedient to instructions, and asks whom she needs to help. The high priest tells her to follow the 2 escorts and leave immediately. Then the girl lost a little bit of the essence of what was happening. Everything falls into place when the leader announces that a war hero from the 8th Berserk Squad will need help. These are the soldiers who killed everyone indiscriminately, enemies and allies, and the heroine will have to answer for one of them. And yet she was still too naive to fall into this trap so recklessly. The girl is already riding in the carriage and decides to explain to us which group the person she has to look after belongs. There was a war between Lacrion and the neighboring country of Solvan, where the latter prevailed in victory for a long time. The morale of Lacrion's army fell, and no one expected victory anymore. It was then that these elite warriors appeared who helped to win. To her allies, she was saviors, and to her enemies, she was demons, and Diren herself was grateful for their appearance. But then they began to attack and ally, showing themselves to be wild animals that can only fight. With this victory, the second prince who led the war rose to glory, and the merits of the warriors of the 8th group were attributed to the prince's army. After the end of the war, these mysterious warriors disappeared as suddenly as they had appeared, and they were forgotten. In the temple, an order was given to cure them and train them so that they would become worthy nobles of Lacrion. Making them people and raising worthy nobles is an impossible task. The heroine may not be able to cope alone, but she is pulled out of her thoughts by a guy who, it turns out, rode with her in a carriage. He said that they were almost there and thanked the girl for agreeing to this assignment. According to the plot, the young man's name is Lovan Lacrion. He is a military strategist from the Tarakth family, the 3rd son. Since the war was over, he had no more work, so he now looks after the 8th group. Not every person can dare to help with such work, but the heroine promised that she would do everything possible. And Lovan is counting on her, because she is his last hope. So he reaches into his inner pocket to get one thing. Diren is held out a whistle with a request to keep it with her. As the guy said, this is a security measure that should be used in extreme situations. The girl becomes sad at the thought that these pets are calmed down by such training methods. Soon, the ordinary priest reached the manor, in which she would live for some time. Some points about order were explained to her. Since guards are constantly on duty in the estate, the girl can always call them for help, but it will be better if she uses a whistle. Lovan had done his job, bringing the priest up to speed, so he hurried back to the carriage to leave as soon as possible. At the entrance, Diren refused to help carry her things, but the polite staff still at least opened the door for her and asked her to be careful. In fact, she was scared to go inside. She expected that she would be immediately attacked by wild beasts, but there was no one there. But the heroine was very interested in the interior of this estate. This sight fascinated her. Every corner was a work of art for her. It was incomparable to the room where she had to live and share a room with someone. Her soul rejoiced from what she saw, and she even began to dance in the corridor and sing, pretending to be an important person. But when she opened the doors of one of the rooms, she was greeted by a rather sad picture. A shabby man was sitting on the floor. The room is a mess, and he himself is covered in blood. His mad gaze immediately rushed in the direction of the woman who entered. Diren immediately came to her senses and returned to reality, and her smile disappeared from her face. Work awaited her. Wild animals are not allowed to show their fear, so the girl tries to remain calm and greets the ward. She slowly takes a few steps forward in his direction, noticing to herself that this beast can easily kill her with its huge hand. They did not break eye contact, and the soldier seemed to have stopped growling terribly. Perhaps he had calmed down. The heroine decided to talk to him because she must first make sure that he was able to communicate, and introduced herself as a servant. The heroine believed that even if these soldiers were wild animals, they were still people, and she was mistaken, so he swooped down on her with one jerk. But it was good that she reacted quickly and blew into the whistle hanging around her neck. At the same moment, the soldier seemed to be stunned, and he flew to the floor. The body was lying in front of her feet and did not move. This caused the attendant to panic a little. She did not understand what had happened. She began to worry. It seemed to her that he was not even breathing. She was afraid that he might be dead, so she sat down next to him to check. The girl circled around him and didn't know what to do with him if he was really dead. Then it turned out that she had killed him. Soon, Diren covered the traces of strangulation on the dog's neck, which appeared after the whistle was applied. It looked creepy. It looked like a hanged corpse, and from now on the attendant decided to use the whistle less often. Now this dog looked small and pitiful. The girl wanted to make him comfortable, but there were small problems with this, because he was heavy. After completing the task, she noticed that due to the muscles in his back, his head was raised, so a pillow was carefully placed under it. Diren didn't want to consider herself a good girl, but she took up this physical labor anyway. She noticed scars on someone else's body, which were apparently fresh, and their origin is unknown. The heroine has already scolded herself for the fact that her kind soul again got into the wrong business. She opened her shirt for inspection. A large, strong, and even beautiful body opened before my eyes, but unfortunately covered with many scars. The girl decides to do this dog a special favor as a sign of apology, but asks him not to tell anyone about it, even though he is asleep at this time. She counted on his intelligence and was sure that he would not talk about her healing services. Diarine knew from childhood that her divine power was amazing, but she always hid it so that it would not be used for selfish purposes. The girl quickly coped with her task and cleansed her body of scars, after which she wanted to taste something sweet about the palace. Suddenly she wondered what her ward ate. It was difficult to imagine that he ate raw meat just because he was a dog. As soon as the thought occurred to her that he had a noble face during sleep, this face abruptly opened its eyes and flew towards her. It flew up so quickly and sharply that it hit the attendant in the face and shattered her nose, and the girl herself flew back. During this flight, she thought that she would die, but everything turned out fine, and Diarine sits in a tattered state in front of her ward. The latter, in turn, shows with all his appearance that he does not trust her, although she tried to explain that she did nothing strange to him. In any case, the treatment was not over yet, so the girl asks the dog to lie down quietly for a little longer. Thanks to her strength, she manages to calm him down, which causes him to doze off and feel relaxed. The heroine had heard that the soldiers of the 8th Squad had sharper senses than the beasts, so she assumed that her footsteps might have cut his hearing. With his divine power, Diarine can calm almost anything, which is what he is doing now. She wonders if the man can tolerate her voice, and in response, she is obediently nodded, and the attendant inside herself praises him for such patience. From their short dialogue, which did not go well, the heroine learned that the fighter's name is Karas, but he does not know who gave it to him. Then she asked if he was often in an agitated state, but apparently the interlocutor did not understand the question. Diarine wanted to try to keep up the conversation again, but her hitchhiker was interrupted by the rumbling of her stomach. The girl was hungry. The heroes decided to start eating. Everything was in order until the attendant turned her head to the ward. Karas coughed and red liquid flowed out of his mouth. The girl thought that he was poisoned. She hurried to use her power to stop the blood and give an antidote, even though she had never encountered such a thing before. Looking closer, she saw that it was not blood, but bright red juice, apparently. Karas was in a hurry to eat and choked. Diarine immediately felt embarrassed by this situation. She could scare the man with her scream, so she asked for forgiveness. At this moment, a menacing aura formed around him. A terrible death wish was felt. He put his hand on her shoulder, and then the girl decided that she was definitely a corpse, so she began to pray. If after death she receives severance payments, then she is ready to accept this death, but the punishment does not overtake her. Then the girl looks up. Karas spits somewhere to the side and wipes his mouth with the back of his fist, after which he reports that all the food is poisoned. The poison does not work on him, but the girl is still worried about his condition. He was able to determine the poison by taste. It makes me sad to think that Diarine is only alive now because Karas tasted the food before her, otherwise she would have died instantly. But the problem of hunger does not go away. They have nothing to eat, and she has not eaten since the morning. At once there were many options for how to die, for example, from hunger, from poison, or from a hungry animal. After a little thought, the girl asked Karas to rely on her because it was time to test her abilities. She did not specify what abilities she was talking about, but simply asked him to wait quietly and ran away. So she ended up in the kitchen. She had a certain goal and hoped that the food on the table was not poisoned. These products were brought by one of the staff of the estate at her request and said that he had contacted Mr. Lovin and he would arrive soon. Left alone with herself, the heroine thought about her skills in cooking. The last time she did this was in childhood. She knows some things roughly. Although this is not enough, she still hopes for a better outcome. After a while, Mr. Lowen himself bursts into the kitchen, asking what could have happened to the girl. He was very worried that Karas could kill someone or even escape, so he was in such a hurry here. Diarine flew up to him and put a finger to her lips, calling for silence, for Karas had not yet eaten and was very irritated. The girl did not expect Lowen to arrive so quickly. She thought that since he was a noble prince, the trip would take 3 days. She admitted that she wanted to consult with him, but after finishing, she ran to the stove as something was burning there. Lovin was curious about what the attendant was doing, and he saw a black, burnt bird on the stove. The idea occurred to him that Saint Diaran cast curses as a hobby, but according to her it turned out to be dinner. The heroine said that Karis got this chicken for them a few hours ago, and she in turn cooked it. She was bringing him soup for dinner and noticed that he had really sat quietly before she came. He stood with his back to the window with a candlestick in his hands. Then the girl saw in him the potential of a noble knight. She even thought that he could make his debut right now if he contained his rage, which he showed towards the bird outside the window and pierced it with a candlestick. Mr. Lowen said that if Karis survived, he would surely become a noble knight someday. Diaran noted that the interlocutor does not have a soul, but according to him, his soul is now just on vacation. He also asked the girl not to be upset, because what she has been doing so far is impressive results. Lovin has high hopes for the girl, and he is sure that there will be no problems with the debut, even if Lady Charlotte comes. Diarine did not expect the mention of this name because she had not been warned that the royal family would soon arrive, who were also very interested in Karis. As the main character says, the current emperor's first empress died, then he married his mistress, Fenaria. But this love did not last long, and then Charlotte appeared. He loved her so much that people called her the second empress. Everyone knew that the emperor's love was for Charlotte and his son Sevian. Diaran is very nervous because if something happens to at least one member of the royal family at a meeting with a rabid dog, then she will be held responsible. Lovin urged the girl to calm down, because these people are sure to be about proper security and precautions. The attention of the two slowly switches to the dark matter boiling in the pot. In theory, it was supposed to be soup, but the attendant believes that it is better to eat it than poisoned food. According to Lovin, this is a common thing, but he promised the girl to bring her fresh vegetables without poison. A demonic monster suddenly appeared in the pot, and the man hurried to grab it to throw it away. Diarine tearfully begged him not to do this, because it was the only thing he could eat. A bird suddenly came to life in the pan, and in Lovin's opinion, it would be more edible than that substance. The gentleman offered to bring cookbooks along with the products and throw this mess away, and the girl agreed with little difficulty. Suddenly, they were interrupted by a loud sound, both staring in the direction of the exit, and their faces took on a grimace of horror. On the threshold stood the evil Karis. He was very hungry, so with a withering look he demanded food. Soon the same dark substance lay on a plate in front of him, and without hesitation, the soldier grabbed it and brought it to his mouth. Surprisingly, he ate everything, and when the girl asked how the food tasted to him, Karis simply demanded more. The attendant ran for another portion, and Mr. Lowen watched her and was convinced once more that she was a saint. Then he turned to Karis to find out what poisons had been mixed into his food the day before. The girl was a little surprised that they could even distinguish between types of poisons. According to Lowen, these skills are acquired through training. According to rumors, not only training, but also various magical rituals were used for acute hearing, sight, and smell. The fact is that divine power is supposed to be used to save people, but this rule does not apply to military priests. Curses were used on children to turn them into human weapons, and the heroine wondered if the temple was involved. Lowen reacted strangely to her interest, and while she was thinking about the answer, Karis finished the cooked food. Without hesitation, she replied that she was not interested in this matter, even if some organization misused magic. She is an ordinary priestess performing assigned duties, and so Lowen hinted that she must do this job with a positive result. Otherwise, the unfortunate result would have to be eliminated, so Diarine promised to do her best. Mr. Lowen left the manor, and the girl thought about her situation. Today, she had a long day. Then in the kitchen, she decided to try her culinary creation, but it could not even be called food. She was shocked, and she ran to her room, after which she jumped on the bed, which she liked so much. At first she was worried that she had left Karis alone, but then she threw these thoughts aside because he washed himself to eat and go to bed. The heroine really liked the blanket. It was very soft to the touch. Apparently the upcoming good sleep will compensate her for today's dinner. The girl felt very good. She would like to sleep until lunch, but during her dreams she did not even immediately notice the guest near the bed. Karis stood like an evil shadow over the bed, and Diarine took a whistle from her bosom, ready to whistle into it. At the sight of this thing, he immediately lowered his dog's ears, and the girl's guesses were confirmed. He was afraid of the whistle. The heroine would like to do without him, but she sees how he restrains himself at the sight of this tool and tries not to kill her. Karis said that he could not sleep because of the noise. He heard all voices, footsteps, and breathing. At this point, Diarine felt a little embarrassed. She apologized for the noise, since it was the first time she saw a good bed, so she was worried. But then the meaning of his words dawned on her, and she was even more shocked that his senses were so sharpened. From the expression on the night visitor's face, it was clear that it would not be possible to convince him to return to his place. Therefore, the priestess offered to chat, since she herself would not fall asleep now, and a night get-together would help relieve tension. The girl pushed back her chair, called the man to the table, and said that she would bring tea, and he obediently complied with the request. Karis sat down on a chair with a straight back. He had perfect posture, and Diarine even wondered where he had been taught this. The tea, it turned out, was already brewed, but it had cooled down, and I was too lazy to go to the kitchen to warm it up. The priestess asked the guest not to be frightened, took the kettle in her hands, and it began to glow, filling with warmth. Then Karis thought that a military priest was sitting in front of him, but this was not so. Usually the holy power manifests itself as healing, but sometimes it gives telekinesis or fiery power. Such priests are made combative. Combat priests, in turn, are sent to the front line, but the girl does not want to die, so she asks the man not to tell anyone about it. He was silent for a while, then poured a mug of hot tea into himself at once. The girl did not have time to stop him, and he burned his throat. The priestess healed his pain, poured another cup of tea, and pushed him towards him, asking him to drink more slowly this time. The heroine thought about her abilities, now looking at Karis. She thinks that training to death makes no sense, and the only thing left to do is to become even more attractive. Then she realized that her thoughts had gone in the wrong direction, and patting her cheeks, she hurried to bring herself to her senses. In the dark, not good thoughts creep into her head, so she decided to turn on the light, but for a person with heightened senses, this is a bad idea. He didn't say anything about the light, and his face looked peaceful. He calmed down a little. But in addition to the girl's breathing, he heard the birds flying from branch to branch, the running mice, and the guards at the gate. Diarine understood why he was so strange, because if you constantly hear small sounds, then the roof will definitely move. For some reason, the idea came to her that if she closed his ears, he would become normal, but it was clear from his appearance that this was a bad idea. This problem is really serious, so the attendant promised him that she would definitely come up with something. Then they had a small dialogue, in which it turned out that Karis only eats and sleeps in addition to training. The heroine's morning was not at all cheerful. At night, during the conversation, she calmed him down, poured holy power into him, and sent him to bed. Perhaps he was fast asleep, but the girl could not sleep, knowing that her ward could even hear breathing, so she was afraid to wake him up. This situation greatly infuriated her, but she came to her senses and stopped making noise so as not to attract the evil beast. She had to put up with it. Diarine crawls out of bed and decides to go to the kitchen to quietly prepare breakfast. Suddenly she flew to the window, behind which she heard loud conversations, where she saw two workers. They were carrying boxes of food and enthusiastically discussing something, and the girl was watching them in horror. She can't shout at them to be quiet, and it's too late, because the sensitive beast has already found the troublemakers. These two grocery delivery men had completely forgotten about their employer's warning, and as usual, they chatted together while working. But then the moment came when their fate was in a precarious position, and a black shadow hung over them. The punishment of these two does not come, because Diarine intervened in the situation, flying down from the window, shouting something to Karis. He, in turn, turned his attention to her and headed in her direction with one jump. He managed to catch the girl. Perhaps she should have just whistled in the room, but it was too late. The workers were worried about her because jumping out of the window was dangerous for her, but she began to scold them and ordered them to run away from here quickly and quietly. They wanted to object to something, but the girl had already raised her voice at them and hurried them up because it was for their own safety. At the sight of the evil Karis, it was difficult to object to anything, so they quickly thanked them for their care and ran away. It became a little easier. It was good that they obeyed, but immediately Diarine remembers the presence of a rabid dog nearby. She thought that if he caught her, he must have regained his mind, so she tried to draw his attention to herself and thank him. But then she realized that he reacted then only because something fell, and now she is trying to calm down his ardor, which is directed towards the fleeing ones. Karis did not even move to her attempts, and the girl was already thinking about drawing a whistle, but then an idea came to her. This person may just be worried, which is normal, so Dairon is slowly reaching out to him. She assures him that everything is fine, that those people just brought them food and they are not dangerous. It seems that she is succeeding, and the words of consolation also work. The girl calls him into the room to rest. This man just has a heightened perception. He has been on the battlefield for a long time. In addition, poison was mixed into his food. Therefore, it is not surprising that unfamiliar stimuli seem to him a threat, and he is simply used to reacting in moments of danger. And Dairon, in turn, must teach him how to live in a place that is not a battlefield. The girl praised her ward for his patience and offered to go to the room to deal with the rest of the scars. She also did not forget to praise herself, because thanks to her reaction, everything was resolved. The next day, the heroine decided to cook for Karis and once again test her abilities. She hadn't expected him to wake up before lunch, but now he was standing next to her and it was time for them to get to work. After the treatment, he slept well all morning and is now calm, so the girl brought him as a bloodhound for poison in the ingredients. For the sake of survival, she has to use the future aristocrat for such purposes. She asked the man to check the vegetables for poison. Everything was fine with food, and the girl thought about the choice of dish and also remembered that new boxes were brought to her. All the boxes turned out to be with cookbooks that Loven had so carefully sent, and the heroine decided to read one of them. But she quickly closed it back because the contents were incomprehensible to her, as if cooking was not for this planet. Suddenly, Karis bent over the book in someone else's hands, examining it carefully, and the girl thought that he just wanted to look. She assumed that he might be interested in books, so she unfolded the book to him and asked if he would like to drop by. But Karis refused, and then the heroine realized that he was just still in working mode and checking everything. It turns out that this person does not know how to read at all, because it is not necessary in battle, so this was not taught in training. The attendant told the ward that they would also have to learn letters, and then asked if he wanted to do it at all. At this point, the man fell silent, apparently thinking Dairon assumed that he simply did not have to think about his preferences before. The heroine has more and more work. She will have to teach this person to express her likes and dislikes. The girl told him that it was normal for an aristocrat to be able to read, so he would have to study, but first they would cook food. For the dish she chose, you need to finely chop the onions and carrots, and Dairon asked Karis if he knew what they were. Since Karis slaughtered people, he can easily cope with vegetables, so the heroine invited him to try. Without thinking twice, the man grabbed a kitchen knife from the table, and only then did the priestess realize her mistake. He gave the knife to the former living weapon, but it was too late. The girl just moved away from him, and if anything, she could escape. Karis first swung threateningly, and then began to wave it, cutting the vegetables into small pieces. Dairon seemed to be looking at the future of humanity. Such a small cut is beyond the control of an ordinary person. Soon the man reported that he had done everything, and this pulled the girl in the trance. She approached to look at the work. On the table, vegetable puree looked at her in response. This is not exactly what she needs. The heroine only wondered where he learned such cutting. It turns out that small cuts are used on the battlefield to torture prisoners and dispose of the corpses of enemies. Now nothing could be fixed, so the attendant simply remembered the innocently killed onions and carrots. The heroes continued to cook. Dairon did everything from the cookbook, and Karis faithfully helped her. After a while, there was real food on the stove in a pot in front of them, which gave off a pleasant smell. Dairon hadn't thought it required so much stamina and agility, but thanks to Karis, they did it. The girl asked him if he liked it, but he replied, as befits a fighter, that for him it was a low difficulty of execution. The heroine did not mean this. She wanted to know if he was having fun and tried to explain what it was. Then she tried it differently, saying that if he wanted, he could continue to do it, and if he didn't want to, then it was not necessary. It seems that Karis began to grasp the essence. Even before he allowed the girl to finish, he immediately said that next time he also wanted to cook. She replied that next time she would also count on his help. She noticed that he already had his own preferences. For today they finished and it was time to set the table. The feelings were mixed, but the stew turned out delicious. Karis's socialization went according to plan, but even when he learned to talk a little, they still had one problem. They sat on the bed and talked about what a man liked and what he didn't like. And when Diarine asked if he liked her, he immediately gave a negative answer. The girl did not like this situation. Even animals respond with love to those who raise them, and here they have this. The reason for his antipathy to her was simple. The girl was just noisy for him. Such an answer led her into a slight stupor. There were moments when she gnashed her teeth or snored in her sleep at night, then Karis almost killed her. The girl didn't know what to do when she was tired. She had a bad sleeping position, and it had been happening less lately, but for Karis, she was still noisy. She wants to cry. Her ward is a good student, but they still haven't found a way to calm his sensitive feelings. He is really advancing in their joint work. For example, he already knows how to cut a steak so that he can make his debut even now. He can stand the noise better than before. In such a quiet mansion, he ate the girl's sounds, so there can be no talk of a ball yet. Diarine explains that she is not an enemy soldier and does not make an attempt on his life, but he was unwavering and gave the same answer. These guys can't handle it if he is irritated even by her breathing, and the argument that people are dying to him didn't fit. Everything was useless. This man does not care. He does not like animals. He does not like all living creatures. As a result, the girl was offended and said that she would live without breathing and promised herself that she would make him say that she loved her. They sat in silence. Karis looked out the window, from where a small leaf flew to his bed. Diarine asked if he thought that even this leaf was his enemy, that a man might be angry at that, but he already knew how to calm himself down. Karis was silent and thought that this girl always made noisy sounds, but next to her he was enveloped in unfamiliar feelings. It's not the kind of calm that drugs or spells induce on the battlefield that leaves him completely unconscious. This noise does not need to be eliminated, it does not cause harm, and then the thought comes to Karis that he likes the world. But the priestess is losing patience now. She doesn't know how much time has passed since she decided not to make a sound out of principle, but her legs are already numb. Initially, the heroine thought that she should take care of the ward like a maid in order for him to become noble. But then she realized that it was not necessary, although on paper she was the noble daughter of a baron, and Karis was not even a nobleman yet. Therefore, she offered them to communicate on an equal footing, and surprisingly, he quickly agreed. The girl was thinking about what form of address she should use for Karis, and stopped at the fact that she would simply call him by name. He, in turn, said that he did not mind, but it was clear from his face that he did not like it very much. The next day, the guards of the estate delivered a new box to the heroine, for which she was grateful to them. The men suddenly began to ask how the young master she was courting was doing, whether it was not difficult for him without servants. The girl understands that these people think of Karis simply as an aristocratic boy with nervous attacks. Diarine replied that she, as a servant of God, would be happy to alleviate the suffering of those in need if she could. The guards were raptured by the Holy Virgin. She was literally glowing, and they asked her blessing. The heroine explains to us that a blessing is an ordinary greeting with the addition of a little holy power. People consider it good luck, so they ask for it at every opportunity. And Diarine has learned to cope with it in an adult way. She tells the guards that she will gladly bless them. She offers them this service for 20 silver coins. The men may not have expected this, but the girl does not lose her self-confidence. The girl began to tell them what serves this world and can give her new power to those who stand in front of her. She says that she will heal these two, and those 20 silver coins will be the will of God. Priests can turn any lie into the word of God, and this is what the girl is doing now, asking the guards to accept this will. The men already agreed, but the attendant decided to shock them even more and said that she would only take 10 coins. One of the guards asked for good luck and love, but the heroine knows that the holy silt will not help here, and they must work on this themselves. She gave a blessing speech as befits an attendant, and the man said that he even felt the fatigue of the last days go away. In general, there is no such effect from the blessing, but Diren really gave them holy power, so their well-being will definitely improve. The attendant completed this small ritual and decided to finally go inside the mansion, and those guards overwhelmed her with thanks. Such a service has a small side effect in the form of a violent reaction, like these two, but God forgive the girl if she takes a risk at work. Yesterday, the heroine had already faced a threat to her life because of the fact that, in a flash, she called Carice without formality. At first there was silence, and the girl became worried, but then Carice asked her to repeat his name. Diren noticed his confusion, not that he didn't like it. Maybe he was just a little surprised. After a short silence, the man moved to the floor and said that he did not like the bed. The girl felt better. He was not going anywhere. The heroine guessed what was going on. No one from the Eighth Joy called him so familiarly, so she would call him that until he got used to it. She said his name several times, and then he suddenly knelt down on her knees and asked her to repeat more. Diren complied with his request, and he, as if spellbound, asked him to do it again and again. As a result, the girl laughed and said that he looked like a puppy who brought a slipper for the first time. At this point, she stopped, afraid that he might take it as an insult, so she stopped laughing so as not to spoil his mood. But then he did the unexpected again. He really put his head on the girl's lap in the manner of a dog. He asked for more again, and she thought he wanted to hear her say his name again, but it was not so. He touched the corner of her lips, as if to indicate that he did not know how to say exactly what he wanted from her. Diren prompted him to ask if he meant laughter, and he put his hands on her legs and repeated the word after her, confirming her guesses. The heroine decided to try since she was asked, but her laughter turned out to be very unnatural. It was clear from the expression on Carice's face that this was not what he wanted, but the girl could not laugh as if on command. "You can't laugh alone." Then the man asked what they should do, and the girl said that usually people laugh together. She also added that he must learn to laugh in order to move in society. The ward was clearly not happy. He put his head in her leg, probably very difficult for him because he had never laughed before. Diren does not yet know how to teach him this, but she believes that he will succeed because he quickly masters everything. She raised her fists to lift her spirits, but Carice still obediently repeated this gesture after her. And now the heroine is standing in the kitchen with a new box and remembers yesterday, believes that Carice will learn and be able to smile. Every time in such cases, she thinks about his past life and whether this person will be able to fit into the most ordinary life among ordinary people. The heroine must do her job and introduce Carice to high society, and what happens next should not worry her. Now she has to focus on what is in front of her eyes, so she comes to the room of the ward. She wishes him good morning and says that today they will practice smiling. Suddenly, Carice grabs the girl by the arm, standing on the balcony railing, and says that someone has come. The girl still doesn't understand what he means, but she doesn't have time to say anything, as they are already flying down from the balcony. Diren screams, asks to stop, and says that there are people downstairs. She can't even imagine what will happen now. Mr. Lowen was downstairs. He fainted picturesquely, and when he came to, he said that the guys jumped so suddenly that he was frightened. He said that if he hadn't pretended to faint, Diren and Carice wouldn't have noticed him, and it wasn't clear who he was portraying now. Perhaps it was a joke, and Lowen tried himself as an actor, but now, as if nothing had happened, he wondered what the guys were doing here. Diren tries to calm Carice down. When he grabs the girl, she is frightened, but they have already had such jumps. The attendant continued to calm the man, helping him to regain his breath. Lowen watched them silently. The girl reprimanded him, for it might have ended in bloodshed, but Lowen said that he had made his presence known, and Carice should have noticed him while he was still at the gate. Carice himself suddenly calmed down and fell silent, and Lowen mentioned that the Holy Father had already become accustomed. Diren was pleased to hear from others confirmation of his guesses. Lowen added that all the girl's efforts were visible. Then the priestess flared up and asserted that she really put all her soul and all her strength into her work. And of course the master promised her a reward commensurate with her merits and invaluable efforts. Diren calmed down and decided to finally ask what had brought Mr. Lowen to them so early. It turned out that he had come to give her a book about how to learn the basics of etiquette for receiving the imperial family in one day. The heroine did not like the terrible title of the book, and in general she had a bad feeling about it. Her guesses were confirmed by Lovin's words that the third son, Sevian, and Mrs. Charlotte would arrive tomorrow. Diarin felt bad. They could not refuse the decision of the imperial family. She simply could not believe in what was happening. Karis silently and intently watched Lovin's attempts to calm the girl, whom he himself had brought to such a state. Finally, the heroes enter the mansion. The girl says something about the fact that they can be executed if they do not please the imperial family, to which Karis replied that life is always at stake. Diarine cannot believe that this man has no instinct to protect his life. She does not know how to raise him, but she tried to convey that he has only one life, and he must cherish and cherish it so as not to lose it. The heroine just hopes that if she tells him this now, then at the right moment he will remember her words. As sad as it was, while they had to give up smile training, they would meet the imperial family in the form of a tough guy. Diarine said that before the meeting, they have one important mission ahead of them that they must complete. This mission turned out to be a spring cleaning, and the heroes have already managed to prepare for it and collected the necessary equipment. The girl explained that they will clean in different places, and it is important to first clean the corridors that are conspicuous. In fact, cleaning is not part of Diarine's job. It should have been done by other people. And in general, they both felt fine without a person taking care of the house, but suddenly they had to start cleaning. Diarine knows that aristocrats are used to seeing shiny corridors, so they need to thoroughly wash the floors at the entrance. Now the situation seems peaceful to her, although it cannot be so since tomorrow important guests will arrive. The girl thought about the fact that recently she had become stronger and stronger, and she had incredible strength of spirit. But then she threw away these thoughts and justified everything by the fact that Karis became more reliable and learned to cook. But then the heroine froze. She left him alone, but she doesn't even know if he knows how to clean. The girl immediately rushed from the place and went to the ward. She ran and hoped that he did not have time to do anything. Soon she came running and was greeted by a very bright and very clean room. She even had to close her eyes so as not to go blind. Karis was drawn into the cleaning process. He wiped the dust under the carpet, but still paid attention to the girl. Diarine noted that she was very good at cleaning, but still stopped him and said that there would be enough visible places. In the course of the conversation, Karis concluded that cleaning was a battle, but the girl corrected it and said that it was a battle with dust. Now it was easier to explain to her that in cleaning, as in battle, you first need to get rid of visible dust and then from trifles. The next day, Diarine and Karis were already meeting the guests. Although the girl's appearance left much to be desired, she had a lot of plasters and abrasions on her. Yesterday, thanks to Karis's superior physical abilities, they had finished cleaning early. So Diarine suggested moving on to the next task. They would learn manners to avoid execution. The girl received the latest version of the etiquette textbook from Lovin, but it is unlikely that they will need it. Ordinary priests are also taught etiquette, so the heroine knows by heart all the rules for dealing with members of the imperial family. The girl decided to start greetings, told the man that she would set an example and he would have to repeat. Karis repeated everything exactly as he was told, and he showed his first greeting bow. Diarine can't believe that he is a beginner. He manages to reach a level that she cannot reach the first time. It was a very simple movement for him, so he did an excellent job with cleaning and etiquette. The preparation was successful, but today he was mad again at the sight of people, and the girl had to hold him with her hands. His sensitivity remained the same, but Diarine still managed to stop him and calm him down. Yesterday they rehearsed at the entrance to the mansion, and as soon as Karis went outside, he began to make absolutely all sounds. The girl had to try everything to tame his violent temper, and she had to go through a lot. She fulfilled her task and turned this mad dog into a noble master. Now she had the idea that she would show how much she was suffering and trying here. The heroine suggested that Charlotte had come here for a political purpose, and if they were found useful, they would try to take advantage of them. Diarine told Karis to wait where he was, and when the people got out of the carriage, he was to greet them as they had rehearsed yesterday. The girl has specially provided a distance that the man can endure, all this for the safety of guests. Charlotte finally stepped out of the carriage, her beauty dazzling and her smile embodying all the warmth of the sunshine. The heroes bowed, and Diarine greeted Charlotte and the third prince, saying that she was glad to see them for the first time. The girl presented her name and the name of the young master standing behind her. Charlotte, looking at Direne's appearance, became worried and wondered where her scars came from. This was the reaction that the girl expected. She talked about how the path sometimes becomes difficult for those who serve God, but they should not stop at fear. Charlotte thought that the priests were just praying and giving blessings, but seeing the girl's suffering made her heart shrink. She leaned over to her son and said that His Highness thought so too, and the boy himself confirmed it in the affirmative. Sevian thanked the priestess for her efforts. This prince is still a child, but at the same time he is sweet and serious at the same time. The heroine noticed that Charlotte looks very young, and these two look more like brother and sister than son and mother. The boy is an exact copy of his mother, except for the color of his eyes. His eyes shimmer with different colors. The boy wondered why Lord Caris was standing so far away, and the priestess replied that he had keen hearing, so he was standing at a distance to avoid hurting his ears. The prince would like to greet him closer, and Direne promised that someday he would be able to do so. Now the girl offered to see where this Lord Caris lived, and the little prince gladly agreed. At first everything was fine, but then all plans were shattered by an arrow that flew in their direction and slightly touched Direne's cheek. Chaos ensued. Someone shouted that it was the murderer. The guards locked Charlotte and the prince, and others went in pursuit. Lovin calls on everyone to calm down and not to run around shouting, to blow the priest's whistles. At that moment, Direne ran after Caris to stop him, and no amount of screaming could stop her. The heroine realized that she was too naive, thinking that Charlotte and the prince had nothing to worry about, because they had bodyguards. The girl did not find Caris. He ran away, but the knight caught up with her, who told her to run away and they would take care of everything. At this point, Direne turned to him and began to raise her voice that he should not be here, since they had received instructions from Lovin. According to the rules, if members of the 8th Squad go into combat mode, then allies must keep a safe distance. The problem is that after they deal with the killer, the members of the 8th Squad smelling blood can break down. With no one from the imperial family to be killed, Direne asks her bodyguard to come back and wait quietly, and she will deal with it herself. Suddenly, someone in the bushes vaguely began to ask for help, but then the sound stopped and someone's hand stuck out on the ground. Probably there was no way to save him. Lovin himself was finally able to get to the heroine. He shouted to the girl not to approach, but to quickly get a whistle. But she did not comply with the request, but simply turned around and ran straight to meet the mad Caris. She didn't care what would happen next. She just wrapped her arms around the man's neck and legs around his waist. Caris did not stop. He did not seem to notice at all that someone was hanging on him. He continued to run forward, ignoring all shouts. Lovin shouted to Direne to blow her whistle, or everyone here would die, and the girl knew it. She wrapped her arms around the other's head and asked Caris to take a deep breath, stop, and just breathe slowly. She even tries to use divine power but still calls on the man to calm down, otherwise everyone will die. Caris was under hypnosis. He didn't feel Direne beating him. He just said that until he killed him, the fight would not end. It doesn't matter to him who to kill, he just needs to destroy, because there are enemies and danger. Direne kept screaming. She called the man's name, then reminded him that he had decided to live like a human. Apparently, this reminder worked, because Caris stopped, although he still felt the presence of enemies. But among all the bad thoughts and sounds, he caught something else. It was a desperate voice that was calling to him. Then he heard the sound of a heartbeat, and the girl, realizing that he had come to his senses, wanted to move away, but she was not allowed. Caris lifted her higher and pressed her closer to him, and then said that he wanted to listen to her heartbeat again. Soon the heroes returned to the estate, where the imperial family and a bunch of knights were waiting for them. They need to somehow politely explain the situation. Charlotte noted that the priestess was doing a much harder job than she could have imagined. She was used to attempts on her life, but she was struck by the courage of a priestess who followed the will of the god. The girl replied that this is just her mission, although her true mission is to impress. Charlotte cannot interfere with the sacred work of the god, but she has deigned to do everything possible to help Direne. The heroine is sincerely grateful for the help, but she is very tired, and now she is not up to it, but she found the strength to ask about the prince's standing. The boy was very enthusiastic about Direne. He considers her very strong and looks forward to meeting her at the banquet. Charlotte had only heard bad things about the case before, but today's event gave her hope. She held out her hand to the priestess and said that she was looking forward to talking to Keres. Diarine noted that the Empress was a very brave girl, and without hesitation shook her blood-stained hand. In the next moment, the heroine felt a sacred power from Charlotte. It was very surprising, but she did not say anything. Charlotte is very pleased that such a passionate and capable priest has taken on this work, and she looks forward to further collaboration. The Empress took her son by the hand and told him that it was time for them to return, and the boy happily said goodbye to Diarine. The heroine was still thinking about holy power. Only a few have such an ability, and even fewer who have powerful ones. It is impossible not to notice such a power in oneself. Usually a person immediately understands that he has it, as it was with Diarine. So far, the girl doesn't know if it's good that the Empress has holy power, but in any case, she can't do anything here. Charlotte and Sevian boarded the carriage, and Diarine bowed goodbye and asked them to take care of themselves on the way home. The heroine turned her head to Keres, and noticed that he was standing too quietly. She was worried, so she told him to stand in her field of vision. She assumed that he had passed out while standing, but that wasn't even surprising because he had to infuse himself with a lot of holy force. Soon she entered the mansion, and Diarine led him into the room and sat him down on a chair to rest. In the corridor, the girl met with Loven. He wondered why she did not use the whistle, because everything could turn into a serious incident. The heroine replied that they are all people, so it will be natural if they treat Keres as a person, so that he becomes one. Diarine was confident in herself, even if it didn't look like it. She was convinced that she could stop it. In the end, everything ended well, and Loven did not object anymore. He believed in Diarine's responsibility. At parting, he said that he would look again if there was something to convey, and the girl could call him at any time. Walking down the corridor, the man wondered if he would be able to see Keres as a human being, although he asked to be treated as a human being. Then he thought of a man whose purpose he did not understand, whether he wanted to make a noble lord out of Keres, or a mad dog pretending to be a noble lord. Diarine went back into the room and asked how he was feeling, and he replied that his condition was normal. They have a new task ahead of them. They will have to take a bath, and the girl has already brought him to the right room. She reminded him that he needed to undress first, and then wash, after which she went to her bath. The man was already standing without clothes. He found a bar of soap, and when he touched it, he immediately pulled his hand away. He noted that this thing is fragile and slippery, and the smell is cloying. Everything is so fragile that it seems to collapse from the slightest effort. Keres fell into his thoughts. He remembered how he and Diarine had talked about what he liked and disliked. So now he was thinking about what he liked about this room. He hated all sounds in general and wanted them all to stop. For him, there are no sounds that he would like to hear, although the sound of water pouring on his hand seems pleasant. As the man washed, he couldn't help but remember listening to Diarine's heartbeat, and he liked it. He was already drying himself with a towel, and then he realized that he wanted to listen to the heart of this girl again, so, without even getting dressed, he immediately went to her. Meanwhile, Diarine was still lying in the bathtub and enjoying her solitude. She felt herself beginning to come to life. She doesn't even remember the last time she was able to carry out such water procedures for herself. She suddenly wondered if the other members of the 8th Division were being helped by the same priests, and how many other mansions there were. But then she tried to put her thoughts aside. She didn't have to worry about others. They were probably coping anyway. The girl wanted to pour water on herself to cheer herself up, but then the doors swing open and Keres appears on the threshold. Such spontaneity cheered her up a lot, so much so that the ladle flew from her hands right into the man's face. From the girl's scream and her frantic heartbeat, Keres bled from his ears, but he stood silently with his eyes closed. Diarine stood terrified. She didn't know how Keres would react to her violent reaction, and she didn't know what he was up to. She tried to explain that you had to knock before you could open the door, and you couldn't just break into the bathroom. The girl climbed back into the bathtub and asked what was such an important matter that made this man come to her right now. The man walked close to the bathtub, knelt down next to him, and said he wanted the sound of the heart to be closer. There was a pause, during which Diarine thought and noticed that Keres had said well for the first time, although no one had asked him. She was very glad that he was growing above himself, and if he were a real dog, he would give treats. But Karis is a human being, and he's sitting here naked and looking at a girl, so she told him not to look, and he obediently closed his eyes. In the end, the girl listened to him and understood everything, but asked him to come out and close the door. Diarene had to get out of the bathtub because she had to run right away if the mad gentleman needed to calm down. After a while, she went out into the corridor to see him. She carefully calmed herself down and tried not to lower her gaze. But still, the heroine noticed that her ward's body is good. He will become noble, and the girls will hang on him. But then the girl noticed places on his body that he did not wash off, and she began to doubt that he washed with soap. As Karis himself confirmed, he always washes like this, and Diarene does not understand what the 8th Squad was doing, since they were not even taught to wash. It is clear that the 8th Squad can be considered suicide bombers, and they do not need to be taught to wash, but the girl does not understand why she should clean up all this. Diarene tied a towel around Karis's hips and told him not to take it off. The man noticed how the girl's heart was pounding and a crooked gait, so he assumed that she was injured or sick, but she asked not to pay attention. They came to the place where Karis was washing, and the heroine noticed that there was almost no water in the bathtub and the towel was dry. The girl began to adjust the water in the tap and explained to the man where hot water flowed and where cold water flowed. I told him to get into the water and also explained how to adjust the water and change the temperature. Diarene asked him to let him know if it was cold or hot, but he only said he didn't like bathing. She touched the water, the temperature was just right, and then she asked what exactly did not suit him. Karis said that this dulls his senses, and he will not be able to react to the attack, and the reaction may slow down. The heroine understands that it's all about being unaccustomed. She asked him to relax even more, although he doesn't want to. Diarene thought that when he got used to the bath, perhaps his hypersensitivity would be dulled a little. She ordered him to sit still and said that she would first teach him how to wash his hair. He is asked to close his eyes so that the foam does not climb, but if he is not afraid of it, he may not do it. The girl keeps up the conversation, then asks to raise her head, then asks to relax her shoulders and praises each time. She demands his hand and reminds him not to forget to wash the dirt under his fingernails properly. If he were an aristocrat, then a maid would do it, but he won't like it, so the girl lets him do it himself. Diarene noticed that Karis was slowly coping with everything. At first there was only despair, and now he can rejoice in the little things. She reminded him that there was a dressing gown hanging at the door, and Karis must put it on before leaving. About an hour passed, everything seemed to be fine. Karis washed and put on a bathrobe, but they had a problem. He chose a pink room with plush toys as an overnight stay, although before that he liked white rooms without distractions. The girl asked if he was sure of his choice, to which he replied positively, although you can't quite tell from him. Diarene's room is very close right behind the wall, so she asked him not to make any noise, and he said that everything would be fine. If you think about it, it would be more convenient to take another room. There are a lot of them in this mansion. Since it was impossible to go around all the rooms in a day, they could see it tomorrow. But Karis said that it would be better to spend the night on the roof. As a result, the man announced the lights out and said that it was time for them to go to bed. The girl agreed and wished him good night. At night, he could hear Diarene's breathing and heartbeat. It was noisy, but he decided not to pay attention to it. In the morning, the attendant praised Karis for washing well, although she did not teach him how to wipe his body, but this could be fixed. The man breathed freshness and the aroma of a noble gentleman. If you tweak it a little, you can already send him to the ball. Diarene called him to sit down on a chair to show him how to dry his head, but Karis didn't really want to. The girl managed to persuade him. They decided that when they were done with drying, they would go to breakfast. The heroine advised him to close his eyes so that his hair would not hurt them, but since he does not like to be closed, he may not do this. On the battlefield, Karis needed to keep an eye on his surroundings and not look away, so he could only close his eyes when he was dying. The fighters of the 8th Outpost must lay their bones on the battlefield, and Karis followed all orders. But this one did not want to. He was afraid to sleep. He endured to the last and did not close his eyes because he did not want to die. Diarene does not force him to close his eyes because he can learn to do everything with his eyes open and get used to it. When he becomes a nobleman, the maids will do everything, but since he is reluctant, the girl will show how to cope on her own. It is still difficult and scary for Karis to close his eyes, but the girl calms him down because he learns quickly. The priestess comments on her every action. She massages the scalp, and the man is pleased with such touches. He would have liked to sit like this for a little longer, but Diarine moved away from him to find a mirror. The girl shows him her reflection, telling him how handsome he is, but he turns away, not knowing what to answer. She again offered to take a closer look. Now he does not understand, but when he goes out, he will definitely understand how handsome he is. As far as the heroine knows, the fighters of the 8th Squad have been trained since childhood, and she wondered how Karis got into such a cruel squad. Not all members of the 8th Division have a smooth training for high society, and not all priestesses survive. One such priest has already been killed by a fighter, and Loven does not yet know what to do with him now. Diarine cleaned up Karis and dressed him in beautiful clothes. Now he looks very dazzling. The heroine thought that with such an appearance, hardly anyone would pay attention to the little things. She asks the man to try to walk. Looking at him, you can already imagine how he would conquer high society. If it were not for the army, wherever he went, he would attract everyone's attention. He must have been very cute as Prince Sevian as a child. It was strange that he had been sent to the 8th Squad with such an appearance. Surely many were against it and said that he had no place on the battlefield, but Karis does not remember this. He has no memories before joining the army. He doesn't know when he enlisted, and he doesn't know who gave him his name. Diarine suggested that all members of the 8th Division had no memory, but Karis said some did. The girl remembered how she was told that magic was used in training. She asked the man to tilt his head. It is unlikely that the memory of all members of the squad was erased. Perhaps there was an accident, or there was a reason to erase the memory. The heroine just wants to figure it out. If she regains her memory, it will be easier to teach manners, so she tries to do something with holy power. The priestess assumed that various magical techniques were used here, intricately intertwined with themselves. The heroine decided that it would be better to first study it and practice and then see what can be done about it. Soon the girl announced that now they would begin a serious study of the etiquette of high society. She threatened that she would teach without indulgence, and Karis quickly agreed, saying that he would be ready. Diarine hoped that Karis would be frightened of studying, and she would be able to see his tears since she could not see a smile. The girl explained that there are many unpleasant moments at social parties that you need to know about. Diarine believes that with Karis's appearance, he will be forgiven for his lack of manners, but there will also be those who will find fault. She decided to tell a little about her debut, then she had to come in an old-fashioned dress from a distant relative. She didn't even know the basics of etiquette, and that day her bones were well washed, but it tempered her character. The story is already old, and the girl decides not to load Kara's head with such stories. But she promises that she will not allow him to get into such a situation. She knows better than anyone how to avoid gossip behind his back. Karis listened to her attentively all this time, but he lagged behind her and stood still, and she turned to her. She could not understand what he was thinking. But despite this, she feels that if Karis goes out, he will unknowingly turn the heads of many. The man mistakenly assumed that his task was to turn people's heads. The girl agreed with him, but said that it was better for him to abstain. At the lesson, Karis surprised the girl again. She could not believe that a beginner in writing could create such a signature. She considers this sign special, and Karis is no different. He was not like everyone else in the study of writing from the very beginning. At first, she did not think to expect too much. She suggested that the man try to write letters. The girl showed me how to hold a pen and explained everything, and the result was great. Then she gave a more difficult task, where small and large letters were mixed in the words, but he coped with this task perfectly. Diarine had thought of trying to create a signature for a high society guest book at the same time, but she hadn't expected Karis to make it so easily. The girl involuntarily remembered how she herself made her clear and neat signature. It was awkward. The maid who accepted the signature could hardly hold back her laughter. They say that those who create signatures for aristocrats make good money, and the heroine could develop this talent as a business plan for old age. And given that she would be the chief priest when she brought Karis into the world, she would soon need a solid signature too. The girl fell into serious thoughts. Perhaps if she said that she made the signature herself, then it would be an abuse. But Karis must understand. After finishing her internal reasoning, Diarine asked the man to give her one signature. But after a while, the girl had a piece of paper with ugly handwriting in her hands, although, according to Karis, he tried his best. The priestess asked him not to strain, because it was a request, not an order, but the man decided to try again, and said that he would not let him down. Now failure meant death for him, and paper meant a battlefield, but in the end, our hero died because he failed again. A few days had passed. Direne's life seemed to have turned into paradise. Her soul was calm. Karis prepared delicious meals for every meal, and when he had free time, he cleaned up. Now Direne didn't have to do much but eat good food, read books to Karis, or teach him etiquette. Today she was choosing what she would teach the future aristocrat. He could now read by himself, and for etiquette she needed new books from Loven. As a result, the girl decided that today they would again try to cook pastries that did not work out last time. Karis now reads a lot, and Direne went to him to ask if he wanted to learn something. Behind the door, a beautiful painting in the form of the handsome Karis was waiting for her. The heroine was very glad that she managed to do such a great job. Suddenly, the man explodes from his place and stands at the window in a tense pose. Apparently something is happening outside again. He learned a lot of things in a short time, but he never got rid of nervousness because it is not so easy. The girl hugged the man from behind. Usually if you hold him for a short time, he quickly calmed down, but now for some reason it didn't work. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door, and both turned back in anticipation of something terrible. They were not waiting for guests, and acquaintances who could come today would not knock so much, but the girl still offered to come down and take a look. Karis had already memorized that if you heard a knock on the door, you had to find out who it was by the voice, and then decide whether to let the person in. The heroine has heard that the 8th Squad has often been assassinated, and if something like this happens now, she doesn't know what to do. She can't tell Karis to pounce on his enemies like a dog, so she asks him to stand still, and says she'll deal with it herself. In the event of an emergency, the priestess has divine power with which she can stand up for herself. It was strange that there was no sound of a struggle, because the door was guarded, so before opening it the girl asked who was behind the door. Mr. Lowen was outside the door. They apologized for showing up unannounced, but the situation was an emergency. He asked to go inside, and besides him there were also people holding a large fighter, who was clearly unconscious. Living for some time in tranquility, the heroine completely forgot that God likes to unexpectedly throw up difficult life trials. Suddenly, an angry Karis appeared on the passage and said that he would not let anyone in. It was clear from him that if they tried to pass, he would tear them to shreds. Direne didn't know what to think of for Karis to let them pass, but she couldn't look at those pleading faces. Therefore, she had to apply a proven method in front of everyone, and she would think about the rest later. It was such a diversionary maneuver that allowed Loven and his subordinates to run through the man. The heroine guessed that this big man was also from the 8th Division, and she hoped that Loven did not have any strange business with her. But it turned out to be so. Loven tearfully begged to take another fighter under his wing, but the priestess refused. She pretended to think about her decision again, but in the end it didn't change in any way. She justified her decision by the fact that against the background of the newcomer, Karis looks like a god's dandelion, and that man killed other priests. The second argument was the way Karis reacted to him, or, to be more precise, he could not stand it. Loven explained that this person had no one else to go to, and if she refused, she could face consequences. The girl fell into mental anguish. She and the Karis have come a long way, and because of someone's stupid decision, she can now be killed. But Loven hastened to reassure her that nothing terrible would happen. The men had served together in the army, and she would just need to look after him for a while until a new priest was found. Direne thought about it. She would not need to prepare him for his debut, but just make sure that he did not cause trouble outside. Logically, and for the sake of fairness, the man proposed to double the maintenance fee. And for reinforcement he promised allowances, quadrupled, and the priestess agreed, because the god ordered to help the needy. Loven was genuinely grateful. Direne was just a savior, although in this situation it would be the worst for her. Soon the heroes were standing at the door to the room where the new fighter was placed, and the girl calmed down her ward. Everything would be fine. In theory, this man was supposed to sleep under tranquilizers, but everything turned out to be the opposite, and he had already crept up from behind the girl. But Karis did not let trouble happen. He pounced on the red-haired man and grabbed him by the throat. He said that he could not be deceived because his opponent was too noisy for his ears. The opponent himself charged Caressa with his foot, calling him a rabid dog, and was able to get out of the hold. Diarine watched them from the sidelines. They continued to fight without respite and even managed to talk at the same time. The girl did not know whether to stop them. Mr. Lovin gave her a whistle to better control Halt. But looking at the two, she decides that this is not a case of extreme dangers to using this thing. Karis beat Halt until he fell silent. He himself, according to him, was fine and had no wounds. They had not had such clashes before because Karis was restrained by orders and the second was then more docile than he is today. No one knows whether they will continue to fight all the time, since they have always tried to suppress the will of the fighters of the 8th Squad. This resentment gradually accumulated, especially in Halt. He was good at surprise attacks and useful for killing. Karis said that if this happened again, he would simply kill Halt because the uncontrollable ones needed to be dealt with. Diarine asked the man to do without radical solutions so that they would deal with everything gradually, and he agreed. He made a decision to find the softest rope so that when the sleeper woke up, he could be tied up, but it could be done gently. As a result, a few hours later, Halt was sitting there all beaten and tied up, eating food prepared by Karis. He liked the food very much, and the priestess decided to clarify whether he could really determine the taste of pleasant food, to which she received a positive answer. The fact is that Karis cannot do this. Such a reaction manifests itself in him only if there is something disgusting in the food. In other cases, he does not enjoy the taste. The heroine assumed that this is the case with all the soldiers of the 8th Squad, but now she is convinced that this is not the case. The girl asked Halt if he could hear her heart beating, or the sound of a bird flying by, and if he was okay at all. Such questions led the man into a slight stupor, and then he was generally offended that they were talking to him like a dog. The priestess apologized for this and promised to stop. She doesn't consider him a dog. It's just that everything was different with Karis. Halt called the girl's sister and said that she was cool, to which she thanked her, but asked not to stare at her so strangely. The heroine noticed that this person definitely has social skills. She and Karis are very different. The thing is that Halt was basically different from other dogs because he entered the army at a more adult age. That is, others needed more training and procedures than him. Diarine once tried to ask the former military Lovin about these procedures, but avoided answering these questions in every possible way. The official order did not say anything about magic and procedures. That is, only the recipient and the sender can know about it. Since long conversations with Lovin did not bring any sense, the sociable Halt can give the heroine the key to the secrets to which Karis was subjected. Diarine asked Halt if he knew anything about those procedures, although he was not suitable for such conversations, as he did not know much about magic. The redhead only said that all this was done to sharpen their senses, and in the meantime Karis sat down to listen too. At first, Halt resisted this, but then the battlefield became unbearable, and he resigned himself to the procedures that would help him survive. Those who could not stand it were killed, and those who should not have been killed, they were taken away and their memory was erased. In that conversation, Halt still told a lot of interesting things. Karis, over time, although irritated, still got used to his presence. They could only wait for the new priestess, and now the two of them squeezed the girl between them and exchanged curses. The heroine decides to enlighten us in how it came to this, and for this we need to go back a few days. Halt was then freed from the ropes, and he expressed admiration for the priestess who had taught Karis how to cook so deliciously. The red-haired man even suggested that he knew how to cook before his memory was erased and lived in some mansion. He was very handsome from childhood. Halt at first wondered how he could get into the army, but if he is really an aristocrat, then everything fits together. Diarine agreed with him completely, and then asked if Halt remembered when Karis first joined the 8th Squad. The man answered positively, said that he came with a completely erased memory, and perhaps he was sent from another battlefield. The girl asked him to tell how he realized that Karis had erased his memory, and how this was determined. Halt replied that such a person could be seen with the naked eye. He had literally forgotten how to speak, live, eat, and sleep. He looked more like a beast. As soon as he was released into the field, she would immediately cut everyone. Even when brutalized, some went mad and had their memories erased, but this was not the case with Karis. Halt confirmed the girl's guesses that if frequent memory erasure leads to big problems with the head, after which they do not survive on the battlefield. The girl suggested that he must have been uncomfortable looking at this since they were comrades, although they could not be called that because the order would easily kill each other. The heroine was sad from such terrible conditions of service, but she has nothing to say since they themselves talk about it so carelessly. Then Halt thought that Karis would quickly say goodbye to life. Saying this, he went to the window so that his reflection could be seen. Then he grinned predatorily and said the obvious that Karis had survived after all, and now they met. Diarine was frightened by his face, but she was more afraid that Keles would go berserk, so she grabbed his arm tightly. She asked both of them to stop exuding a murderous aura. After all, they hadn't fought before, and everything was fine. Halt turned away, ruffled the hair on the back of his head, and replied that the mere sight of Karis made him want to fight him. The girl could not explain his seizure when he stared at him like that, but she concluded that he only had such a reaction to Karis. The red-haired man began to get even angrier, saying that the attendant was infuriating him with just one look. And now he was completely furious. Everything about Karis him off, his eyes, nose, mouth, and everything else. Karis covered the girl with his hand and asked her to move away. He was also starting to pour and was already ready for a fight. The priestess knew that if the two men clashed now and went out the window, they would be out of control, and Halt was already running into Karis. She could not allow this, so she hugged the man from behind and asked him to stop. She had already decided that it was too late to stop them, but Karis calmly stood still as he had been asked. The girl raised her head to look at him and saw a large bruise on his cheek. She was shocked by what was happening, because Karis had been hit, and Halt himself was already in a stupor. Diarine stopped staring and mentally praised the man for his restraint, but this would not last long. So we had to get down to business, and she walked towards Halt and asked him to calm down. But the man did not calm down. He was still irritated and angry, not without insults. He said that she could not tell him. The girl safely ignored the curses, took his hand and offered to at least try to calm down. She still held his hand, called him brother, as he called her sister, and said that they could do anything. Looking at him, she understood that if Karis was a beast, then Halt was just a problematic ward against his background. Sometimes problematic clients come to the temple, with whom it is impossible to negotiate, but the priestess has found a way to solve it with the help of suppression of the spirit. Therefore now Diarine assures Halt that he is a brave man who has overcome many troubles and trials. She pours sacred power into him and asks him to feel the joy of meeting the world. He will be able to curb his strength of spirit and spiritual power. Of course, this method of the priestess worked, and the man seemed to stop being angry and think about spiritual power. Or rather, he wondered why he needed spiritual power, and the priestess replied that he needed it to calm down. And indeed, the spiritual force worked as it should. Halt really calmed down and was even surprised by this. In his joy, he grabbed the girl by the waist and lifted her above her head. For the first time since the war, he experienced such calmness. It even seemed to him that his third eye had opened. He was delighted with the priestess, and he wondered how she did it. Diarine now finds him dazzling. It is a pleasure for her to watch when someone shines and grows so right before her eyes. Her self-esteem increased significantly behind these thoughts, but she was pulled out of them somewhere down in the literal sense. It was Karis. It was he who pulled the girl away from Halt. He was clearly displeased with someone else's action. They began to get angry with each other again and growled, although one of them was more talkative, but the girl asked them to calm down. Halt has just calmed down, so she asks them not to fight, and they can talk over lunch. Since they are good doggies, they will not talk during food, and ask to confirm her thoughts on this matter. She had to force a smile, but it was still useful, so Halt calmed down and deflated. Then she turned to Karis, who seemed to be quiet. He looked a little sad, but still agreed with the girl. The heroine felt as if she was between two rocks. Perhaps she had done things that she would have to deal with. A few more days passed after that, and Halt was constantly furious for no reason. At first, Diarine thought he was just nervous and trying to cling to everything to fight Karis. She had heard the saying that smart dogs are more nervous and cause more problems. But he was digging even into the lying stones that blocked his way and decided to run over him. The girl understood that this was not her business, but the problem was that emotions were easily transmitted, and Karis was also starting to get irritated. Halt was angry even at the cloud that he thought showed him the middle finger, and it was unforgivable. The heroine might have thought that he was deliberately provoking Carice, but watching all this, she realized that he was just crazy. And now, when Halt was once again enraged and asked for a massacre, Carice hugged Diarin to calm down and protect her in case of anything. According to the priestess's observations, he has become more capricious, visible due to the fact that he tolerates Halt. He tries his best to listen to Diarin and control himself, believing that this is also a trier of receptivity. The girl came up with the idea that soon Carice would be independent, and also that in childhood he definitely suffered and now loves to be stroked so much. She told him that she needed to calm Halt now, and she would stroke him later. And he, of course, agreed. Diarin begins to come out of the embrace and explains to Halt that everything is already fine, so he needs to calm down. However, she did not manage to finish because Carice unexpectedly pulled her back. He put the girl back and he caught up with Haltam and said that someone was approaching, both of them looking warily towards the window. The priestess asked who it could be. Perhaps it was Loven again, but Carice said that he could not see anything. Almost at that moment, something flew into the window quickly and swiftly, breaking the glass, and Carice immediately rushed to cover Diarin. Both landed on the floor, and an iron arrow was stuck almost next to the girl's head in the floor. Halt immediately rushed through the window with the clear goal of destroying the danger, and the priestess could not stop him with her screams. She blew herself up from the floor and rushed in his direction, but Carice stopped her, saying that it was dangerous. Diarin, of course, is aware of the danger, which she told the man about, but Halt must be stopped. She explained that it would be worse if he went outside in this state and began to rowdy, so it was necessary to catch up with him as soon as possible. Carice listened to her attentively all this time, after which he threw the girl on his shoulder and said that he understood everything. But the girl, apparently, stopped understanding something, but Carice at that time was already flying with her from the window down. Initially, the heroine wanted to run, but it doesn't matter when she is carried by such fast legs of Carice. Soon he heard some sound and decided to stop, and at the same time lower the girl to the ground. Both of them looked towards the trees where the sounds were coming from, and Diarin had time to think about how lucky it was that Halt hadn't climbed over the fence. She understood that, like the last time with Carice, she could not rely on luck in any case. It will be much worse if now Carice goes berserk after Halt, so you can't do without a whistle. The girl reached for her chest, but did not find the whistle there. At that moment she realized that the situation was worse than ever. She remembered that she had left it on the dressing table because she hadn't used it in a long time, but now she needed it more than ever. Carice warned that he would come closer. Diarin was very nervous. She wanted to stop him, but did not finish. She didn't know if she would be able to return for the whistle, so all she did was ask Carice to be careful. They were not so far from the place where the corpses of the fighters lay, among whom one was left alive alone with Halt. The red-haired man with a mad face rushed at the soldier from all sides. It seemed that this massacre amused him. The situation was worse than Diarin had thought. If he hit the target even once, he would win, but for now he was getting wounds against the knife. The girl was already thinking of dropping everything and running, but she can't do that, deciding that it's better to do nothing. She tapped the chest of Carice, who was already ready to intervene in the fight, and said that he could not go there. The priestess couldn't leave them here, so she decided to use her sacred power. The fire swirled around her arm, after which it went straight into the fighter's face, which caused him to start screaming, but this did not save him from death. The heroine has not done this for a long time. She used this method in war only in hopeless situations. That arrow was definitely flying at her, so what happened now can be called self-defense, which means that God will forgive Diarin. Finally, the girl returned to reality and remembered about the guys who need to be taken back to the mansion. Carice was angry and still intended to fight, but Diarin immediately hugged him to calm him down. She wished that Halt would calm down easily too. But now he is standing and trembling, and his eyes are still frenzied, and the girl at first thought that he was shaking with rage. In the heroine's head, there are guesses that need to be convinced and checked, so she carefully calls the man by name. Halt did not survive the war quite in his mind, and terrible things are even more frightening when you know about them in advance. Diarin cautiously approached him and informed him that she was fine. She realized that he was on a rampage because he was scared. Therefore, she came even closer to hug him as a sign of consolation and tell him that there were no murderers and everyone was defeated. She said that no one else was attacking. Halt was shocked, but it seems that his mental clarity is returning to him anyway. She explained that they didn't need to fight because they were safe now, and she had finished them off. Halt has been repeating the lova about safety, and the priestess can't help but be glad that he already speaks like a human and quickly calms down. But something clearly did not go according to the system that Diaren imagined, because Halt suddenly began to cry. He cried and talked about how frightened he was, and the priestess tried to calm him down even more. She was glad that the pats on the back worked, and suggested that we go home to go to bed. The girl continued to calm down and infuse holy power. The situation was a little awkward. But, despite this, she managed to stop the process, however. At that moment, something threw her back again. It was Karis again, who grabbed Diarene, holding her right by the neck, and kept repeating that he would not give her up. The girl could not breathe, so she told him to calm down, and that if she was not released, she would suffocate. The grip on her neck loosened, and she breathed a sigh of relief. Now that her life was safe, they could return. At least she thought so, but Halt thought differently at the heartbreaking look of the tear-stained look. It all sounds like a romantic scene when a young girl is between two men. But in reality, the heroine got the role of a cutlet in a sandwich, which was squeezed on both sides. That evening, Mr. Lowen came unexpectedly to tell them that a replacement had been found for the priestess and to take Halt away. He was grateful that the red-haired man had been put to sleep, and he believed that today's incident had played into their hands. Lowen asked how Halt had behaved, and the girl did not answer immediately, but said that he had become much better. She looked at the side where Halt was packed and asked him not to tie him up so hard. But Lowen explained that it was just in case, although thanks to her strength, he would not be afraid on the way back now. Then he asked for the whistle back and said that it was time to go back to the carriage. Upon returning to the mansion, Halt managed to talk to Diaren for a while. He was dissatisfied with himself. He thought it would be okay because he had gotten so much better since he had come here, but he had broken free anyway. He used to have eyes on his forehead and steam coming out of his ears, but now he had learned to control himself. His head was so clear now, it even seemed to him that this was the most adequate state he had ever been in. Now, even if Karis provoked him, he would not be fooled, but the priestess was immediately worried and asked him to do without checking. Halt easily agreed with her and continued to share his impressions that with his arrival he began to sleep as much as 3 hours. The girl was surprised, but Karis explained that warriors like Halt are supposed to get very little sleep due to the nature of their task. Halt was unhappy that Karis was responsible for him, to which Karis replied rather harshly, and the two again had an altercation. Diarene didn't quite understand why Karis had such a reaction to him, perhaps because she had hugged Halt and he was jealous. The red-haired man continued to compare Karis to a dog that had already turned into a puppy, but the priestess tried to ignore him. She was glad that he was feeling better, so she offered to help him sleep more soundly. She can't do it every day, but today he's scared, so it's a special case. Diaren thinks that lack of sleep affects emotionality. If Halt sleeps better, then his mood will rise. After that, she poured some divine power into him and put him to sleep, and then they took him away. If he were conscious now, they would probably be able to say goodbye properly. But the heroine would like to forget those arrows aimed at her and the rest of the events of the day, so she suggested that Karis return to the mansion. On his return, Lowen put his knee to a man and told him that he had taken Halt as he had been asked. The stranger expressed his desire to wipe someone off the face of the earth, but he feels sorry because they are very competent. Lowen asked if he should send more knights there, but the stranger replied that he should not, and that the person in question would be on his guard. This stranger ordered Lowen to try to talk to someone, and if he couldn't, then send someone else. This mysterious man believes that Lowen is lucky to have been given the chance to serve him, which is comparable to the mercy of the gods. He asked him to get up from his knee and said that he hoped to see him soon, to which Lowen gave polite answers. At the end of the conversation, His Highness reminded him to make sure that the next time Lowen sent someone out, he should make sure that he did not have the Emperor's insignia. The next day, Lowen brought a new cook to Diaren and Karis's mansion. She was polite, so she said hello. Then he introduced another person who would be the manager in this house. The girl greeted those present. Lowen took Diarene's hands and happily announced that, thanks to her spiritual accomplishments, they had been able to recruit staff. The girl was very grateful but asked him to keep his distance because the evil Karis was already standing behind her. The man flew to the door and assumed that Karis was all very sensitive, but the girl said that there was no need to go so far. He took note of the information and also said that when the manager inspected the condition of Karis, the rest of the staff would arrive. Loven admired Diarine. She was sent to him by the gods, to which the girl asked not to forget to mention this in the work report. Of course, he agreed and said that he used only carefully selected phrases. After they said goodbye, and the man was about to leave, and the heroine noticed that after the last incident, there was a certain distance between them. But this is the distance that the performer and middle manager should have, so there is no need to reduce it again. The girl turned her gaze to Karis and thought that he had become more sensitive lately. Lately, she has not even been able to earn some change on the guards because of the ward's nagging. And not long ago, Loven could only talk when Karis was hugging Diarine. But this cannot continue, so the priestess began to actively educate the ward and began to refuse hugs. Despite his sad face, like that of a rejected puppy, she still stood her ground and said that it was impossible. These sad and stern looks continued until they were interrupted by the voice of the steward, who had been watching them all this time. But the girl said that it was okay and asked not to worry. She fully understood the young master's personal preferences. As a result, the manager decided to return to the topic of work. They will need to measure various parameters of the young master. She explained that they would check his diet, skin condition, body size, and the like. And one important part that needed to be clarified was that for this they would have to come close to Karis and touch him. Diarine asked Karis himself if he minded, and if he was too uncomfortable, they could do it later. The manager finally understood what the problem was. The young master simply did not like to be touched by strangers. All the procedures are difficult to do without touching, and she understands why the salary is so high. However, the heroine kept silent about the fact that this is an allowance for the risk to life. Then the manager came up with a wonderful idea. Saint Diary would touch with them, then perhaps everything would be fine. She explained that since the young gentleman is unpleasant to be touched by strangers, the presence of someone close will help the situation. Diarine suggested the idea that Karis would get used to it over time, because the staff had been brought here, but the girl's worries only increased. Then the manager explained that the client should not be forced to get used to it, but it was necessary to find the most comfortable way for him. She asked again if Karis was against it, and he made it clear that if it was an order, then he agreed. Apparently, the girl was delighted with his mood, so she also hurried to show her professionalism and her set for work. There was a lot of work ahead of them. She listed the courage of things related to the color and type of skin and hair. Karis assumed that he would be trained under torture, but Saint Diarine spared him such thoughts. After the work carried out, Karis realized that torture was not always associated with blood. He was given a stormy morning. This woman examined him thoroughly from the pore to the hair, and in the end he no longer understood what she was studying. Diarine was also tired and lay on Karis's lap, both of them thinking about the young master's dubious duties. Suddenly their cook burst into their thoughts, informing them that it was soon time for dinner. She offered them chocolate while everything was being prepared, but the priestess was more concerned about how long she stood nearby. Karis said that she was there all this time, and the girl reproached him for not telling her about it earlier. Diarine apologized and offered to take the cook to her room, but she said they had to reap first. The woman handed her chocolate and said that they would be a little more cheerful after it, and then they could accompany her to the kitchen. The girl accepted the treats and said that she would eat them with pleasure. Karis, by the way, also thanked them, not forgetting to be polite. She was happy to receive the dessert from the professional chef, but handed the chocolate to Karis's mouth first. The man sniffed the treat and said that there was no poison in it, but he had never smelled such a smell before. He couldn't even tell if it was food, and Diarine understood him because he hadn't tasted anything sweet in war. She said it smelled amazing, and so that Karis wouldn't worry, she would try it first. The priestess took a small bite and tasted it, while the man silently watched her lips move. After that, she hummed loudly and exclaimed that this chocolate was incredibly tasty, as expected. It was also the first time she had tried this, and all her emotions were obvious, which did not escape the eyes of Karis, who was a little taken aback by such a sight. They stood close to each other. Diarine pulled a piece of chocolate to the man's cubes for him to taste too. But Karis was in no hurry to take it into his mouth. He just looked at this piece that had already been bitten before him. At first, the cook silently watched all this, and then said that there were a lot of sweets, and it was not necessary to eat one for two. Of course, the girl could share and take the whole candy, but she did not notice the awkwardness of the situation, and just wanted to be friends. The next day, the heroes were sitting at the table. The cook warned that she would soon bring lunch. In the meantime, there were many desserts in front of them, but Karis did not understand what they were. He saw in them caked blood and dirt. Diarrheen understood everything. He just wasn't used to it yet, so he needed to try, and then he would understand. Karis reached for a piece of cake and covered it with his hand, causing the chocolate mass to stick to his limb. He seemed confused and did not understand what was happening, but the girl calmed him down and explained everything. She had forgotten to tell him that desserts were eaten with utensils, but now she had put her dessert on her fork, showing that it was possible. She dipped this piece in chocolate and handed it to Karis to try, because this method is also delicious. Like a dog, he considered the proposal at first with confusion, but did not resist. For Diarrheen, it was a touching picture, where her wild puppy became completely tame. Still, he accepted the fork of dessert and put it in his mouth, chewing it thoroughly to explore the new taste. The taste was strange for him, but the girl said that if it was not tasty at all, then he could spit it out. He had a strange feeling. It was like an outstretched hand in which a warm light could be seen. The priestess noticed the change in the man's face and realized that he was not so uncomfortable, so she immediately handed him another dessert. While Karis obediently chewed what he was given, the girl tossed between sweets and chose which one to give him next. The man looked at Diarrheen. He did not yet understand when she gave it to him. He took it and then smiled when it was good. He felt the corners of his eyes and lips twitch slightly, and his breathing became uneven. This was not hidden from the girl's eyes. She happily told Karis that he was smiling, and said that sweets lifted the mood. She asked if he understood what she said was sweet, and the man with a faint smile mentally repeated the word. So they sat together at the table while Karis continued to taste sweets. The girl kept up the conversation. The cook successfully adapted to the mansion. She brought fried lobster and turkey for lunch. Diarrheen and Karis are used to her too, and the mere sight of this man makes them hungry. The girl thanked the cook and noticed that this time the portions were larger than usual, to which she replied that there would be another person today. Before the priestess had time to ask whom she meant, Mr. Loven, who was sitting next to her, gave a voice. She didn't know when he had arrived, but he said he had been sitting there since the two had ignored him, staring only at the cook. Loven noted that Karis had adapted to life with a cook, so the number of staff could be increased. But the young master said he didn't want to, but Loven was still incredibly glad that he said it without throwing it. Karis repeated to him not to bring people and not to come himself, and he was only glad that nothing was thrown at him. During the meal, Diarrheen thought that the cook fit in well. She was very quiet, slow, and only worked. To put it simply, she is just perfect, but perfect means rare, so the girl is worried. She did not know if it was possible to leave Karis in a beauty salon who did not know what a sense of beauty was. All her anxious thoughts were interrupted by Loven, and he asked Saint Diarrheen not to worry so much. In her joy, she asked him for confirmation of her guesses, that he had picked up the others who were as perfect as the cook. But the man did not confirm her hope, and said that there was nothing to worry about, after which he offered to start eating. The next day, the one who was most worried about came, a hairdresser showing off his tool near his client's head. Diarrheen immediately rushed towards the girl and grabbed the scissors directly with her bare hands, despite the fact that it was dangerous. She didn't hide her nervousness well, but she still said that the blades were not allowed because the young master had bad memories of sharp objects. The hairdresser forgot about this point, but then showed a new scissors in the form of a bunny so as not to scare at all. The girl showed the tool to her client and asked if he would be satisfied with it. After a while, he just put up with it. She was glad that he liked it, even though he looked like he had been sucked out of his soul, but the main thing was that he calmed down. Soon, the hairdresser got to work providing her help to get her hair in order. Diarrheen was very interested in what would happen in the end, given that now his appearance was already impeccable. The result turned out to be even better, one could imagine. The heroine thought that she was already used to his beauty, but it turns out it can be even better. The worker began to pat the priestess by the shoulders because she was incredibly glad that she had succeeded. She said that she would rather die than let another barber touch this man. Karis picked on some words and thought that the girl was saying something about bloodlust, but Diarin asked him to calm down. The worker turned to him and asked if he liked the result, or if he needed to cut and trim something else. The man silently walked over to the mirror and stared at his reflection for a while, not knowing how to evaluate the work. He told the barber that he didn't need anything else, and the girl was glad that he was pleased. She admitted that she was worried that instead of the soft image that Diarine herself requested, it would turn out to be strict and elegant. The employee said that with a well-groomed beard he has a neat look, so he is unlikely to look like a bad person, and his hair was also dyed. At the last moment, the priestess fell into bewilderment. Karis said that his beard was shaved to 0, and he did not remember anything about his hair. The barber latched on to one sentence and assumed that Karis had served in the army, but Diarine began to deny it. She must keep it a secret that Karis served in the 8th group, so that the girl does not run away from fright and does not spread rumors. The heroine wondered why the worker decided that Karis's hair was dyed, but that she pointed out the absolute blackness of his hair. The fact is that usually, even with very dark hair, other shades are visible in the light, but this is not traced in Karis. The hairdresser noted that it was fashionable among young gentlemen at one time, and the heroine remembered something at that moment. She remembered that she had once tried to see what spell had been cast on Karis's head, and the ones she knew didn't fit. Sacred power as well as spells are dangerous to the mind, so the priestess only lightly touched his scalp. Therefore, the heroine assumed that the spell was not cast on the head but on the hair. The hairdresser also noticed that usually dyeing harms the scalp, but Karis has a healthy scalp, so they don't have to worry about hair loss. The worker packed her things and noted that such people's hair grows quickly, so they will have to take care of it about once a week. She also asked to take one day off the following week, to which the priestess gave permission but asked what had happened to her. The girl said that all next week there will be a festival in honor of the second prince's birthday. Diarine wished her a good rest at the festival, and the worker thanked her and promised to buy her a souvenir. The heroine thought about the fact that they had been in a state of war for so long that festivals were almost never held. The hairdresser is already mentally at the upcoming holiday because this really has not happened for a long time. The heroine did not know whether to rejoice, because there was most of the work in the temple during the festivals, so there was no need to think about entertainment. Soon the worker headed for the exit, and Diarine wished her a good rest and said that she would call when dinner was available. The guys were left alone. The girl said that they would have to talk to Loven, because the others would also take a day off. She looked at Karis. He would have to meet new people all week, so he also needed to unwind. The girl patted him on the head and praised him for being patient yesterday and today. He did an excellent job. She continued to smile at him and said that they would just as calmly take care of their skin. The heroine was worried about the haircut, but it went well, so she hopes that it will be easier in the future. The next day, a new worker named Skinel came to them. She explained that she would take care of the young master's skin. She had also heard that he was very sensitive to sounds, so she promised to be careful not to make noise. She knew that he had been cared for by a priestess, but now they would share these duties, and it would be easier for her. Diarine noticed that this girl was perfect, but in a very different way from the cook, but she was happy to cooperate. She and Karis were sitting in a rather strange position, the man hugging her, sitting on the floor. The heroine was glad that Skinnell was not too surprised by this. She left him so that he would not do anything stupid. Initially, the girl squeezed him into a decent position. As befits a young master, this position is not good for the spine, but it looks noble. But as soon as Karis heard that someone had come, he immediately returned to the girl's arms. The heroine decided to leave everything as it was and write it off to the whims of the master. It remained to be hoped that everything would be fine. The priestess was preparing the man for the meeting and explained that today a cosmetologist had come who would often touch his body. Karis learned everything and said that if he found anything suspicious, he would report immediately. Diarine mentally reassured herself that he had done a good job of taking care of his appearance, so he could do it now. Scannell politely asked the young master to allow her to examine the condition of her skin. Presently she covered her mouth with her hand as if she had noticed something on his face, and the priestess asked anxiously what was the matter. The cosmetologist hastened to reassure that there were no problems. The gentleman had such smooth skin that she was not sure if there would be a job for her. She heard that he did not receive much care, so she asked if it was possible to touch a little, to which the man furrowed his brows. Scannell was informed that he was uncomfortable with people, so she suggested thinking of her not as a person, but as air. Dane mentally agreed with her, as not even her footsteps could be heard, so she might even be a murderer. But she hastened to rid herself of such thoughts. Such a thing could not be, because Karras would smell blood. She sometimes forgot to call him young master, but then she corrected herself at once, and now she asked him to stand up. Scannell thanked him for his permission and asked him to look at the back of his hand. From the outside, it seemed as if she was trying to pet the cute puppy Diarine, who assured her that he did not bite. And now it turns out whether her baby will be able not to bite a stranger, but for now he stretches out his hand forward. Tears of joy flowed down the priestess's cheeks. She saw Scannell touch his hand, and now she could leave without regret. The cosmetologist was interested in Karras's feelings, and also shared the fact that among her clients there are also those who are sensitive to touch. The heroine saw that Karras calmly withstood contact with a stranger. This is not only progress, but also an indicator of Scannell's professionalism. Diarine admired her. She is so attentive and caring. She asks permission even for ordinary things. And when the worker offered to carry out the procedure now, Karras turned to the priestess as if asking something. The heroine caught herself making most of the decisions herself, because she was too lazy to explain and wait. But this could not go on, because the young master should be Karras, not her, so the girl told him to decide for himself. Scannell noticed his confusion and said that he didn't have to answer right now. He could call her whenever he wanted. Diarine suggested that he try it now, while he was too uncomfortable, but reminded him that it was not necessary. If he is just afraid of the unknown, then she can stay close, but if he still does not want to, then they will postpone it for later. After that, the man turned to the cosmetologist and said that he agreed, to which she replied that she would try for his comfort. Scannell clarified that the priestess would be able to attend, and now she was leaving to prepare everything for the procedure. The heroine noted that this girl is like a walking textbook on aristocratic manners. Karras himself also learned the manners she taught him well. Diarine feels strange in the world of aristocracy, although it will be enough for her to shove Karras into it and leave. She wonders how he feels about people being so focused on him, adjusting and caring for him. The man does not know what he feels, but the girl replied that over time he will definitely understand. The priestess explained that his feelings were at the forefront, and if he didn't like something, he had to say it right away. After a while, Miss Scannell and Karras went into the bathroom, while Diarine waited outside. The worker asked if she would come in too, but the heroine thought that the priest should not go into the bathroom with them. Then Scannell said that she would make sure that the young master was not in danger during the procedure. The priestess agreed and asked to call her in case of anything, because she was worried that their child would not harm the girl. Diarine couldn't tell that if Karras got water, he might start biting, so she worried and walked back and forth. Suddenly, the girl heard some kind of clap inside, followed by the voice of her ward. Then she instantly flew to the door handle. But then she stopped herself at once, because there was no screaming, and there was no sound of Scannell falling. The heroine urges herself to calm down, because this is all part of the process. She must wait a little longer. Then she hears the voice of the beautician, who apologizes and explains that she just wanted to help her undress, but Karras did not want to. Diarine instantly put her ear to the door to hear the conversation and make sure the man was alive and well. The worker suggested that he change into his dressing gown, and the priestess heard that he did not say anything and probably did as he was told. As soon as she thinks that the day has come when this child calmly obeys others, she hears his repeated protests. The priestess realized that it was too early to let him go, but he was very excited, and if she heard his protest again, she would have to go in. She didn't have to go in herself. The door opened by itself, and Scannell peeked out of it, needing help. The girl agreed because she was specially waiting in case something went wrong, and it was good that the worker was still alive. Scannell noted that the young master is not very fond of human touch, so she wants to lend Diarine's hands. She explained that perhaps he likes her hands, and her healing effect will make everything better. The dentist was instructed to make the gentleman radiant and shiny, but he apparently does not like her, so he asks for help from the priestess. But the priestess was not happy with this situation. She first showed Karis how to wash, and he coped on his own. She didn't want to burden herself with more work, so she said that Karis would get used to it one day. The employee immediately flew up to her and asked her not to say so, otherwise the client would hear since he was an aristocrat, they could not ask him to adapt to us. Scannell is an independent worker in the service sector, so the convenience of the client is as important to her as her own life. So he had to find another way so he wouldn't have to get used to it, and Diarine even began to understand her. She realized that in the advanced service industry, there are other rules that are different from the usual etiquette. Since the young master was also frightened today, the priestess suggested postponing the procedure until tomorrow. She told the worker to go first, and in the meantime she would calm Karis down and also leave, so they parted. The heroine pulled back the curtain and saw an angry and frightened Karis in the bathtub, who was covering himself with a bathrobe. But when he saw Diarine, his face immediately changed, and if he had a tail, he would definitely wag it. The girl asked him to wait a minute, as it was necessary to wash off the aromatic oil, and he had to put on his robe properly. But he ignored all her requests and just hugged her waist tightly and buried his head in her stomach. She asked to be released, but Karis did not do so, as if in protest because he was forced to do something he did not like. The girl stroked his head and tried to talk to him. He did not like that woman, but he did not respond to the proposal to call someone else. Diarine clarified that he was uncomfortable when other people touched him, to which he replied that he did not want to. She explained that in order to become a real young master, you need to do it, but Karis still does not want to. The heroine understood that his feelings were important, but they could not avoid everything that he did not like, and this led to a dead end. The next day, the heroine prepared her secret weapon, thanks to which she will be able to protect working conditions herself. Last night, the guys had a serious conversation where Karis confirmed that he does not like to be touched by other people. And the girl asked him what he thought about her touching him with someone else. This scheme works with unpleasant sounds. When Diarine says that everything is fine, then he can tolerate them. Therefore, it can be assumed that if she touches it with Miss Scannell, then everything will be fine. Karis did not know what she thought about this, but the girl was optimistic and believed that everything would work out. Just holding hands will not be the slightest difficulty for Diarine, compared to a thorough wash. Soon Miss Scannell came to see her, and she wished her good morning and told her that she was counting on the priestess that day. Diarine decided to work as much as she was paid. She stretched out her hand to the girl and said that she was sincerely counting on her. The girl stretched out her hand in response, and a brotherhood of arms began to emerge between the two workers. The cosmetologist prepared a smaller bath this time, making a bias on the fact that it would be calmer in it. Scannell decided to apply a soothing aromatic oil, which might make her a little less unpleasant to Karis. Diarine liked the fact that her colleague was now asking directly, whereas before she had perceived Karis as a very shy and timid young gentleman. The priestess said that it wasn't that he didn't like Scannell herself, but that he was just strained by strangers, and they decided to try the method they had come up with at night. The cosmetologist poured oil into her hand and explained that the more sensitive a person is, the more a familiar touch helps him. She had already smeared the butter in her hands and said that it was time to start working, and both girls were ready. A little later, the situation got a little out of control. Both work colleagues were sitting on the floor with rounded eyes. Karis was standing opposite them, still in the bathtub, but his robe had fallen off him, and his dignity lit up everything around him. At first it held up well. There was no noise except for a dropped bottle of oil. They were almost done, and all that remained was to transfer it to the bed and complete the procedure, but Scannell accidentally dropped the bottle. She crouched down to pick him up, but Diarine landed with her, wanting to help. It was this sound of a falling object that prompted Karis to get up from his seat, and the sliding robe did not bother him. The heroine thought that Scannell would put his clothes back on. As a professional, she must have seen the bodies of all sorts of men, but she was in no hurry. Karis is not an easy man. This fact made the girl blush. Her possible love would be suitable for a more innocent situation. But the problem is that this frenzied heartbeat comes from Scannell, and for Karis it is very noisy. The worker apologized and said that she would quickly prepare everything, and the man incinerated her with a murderous look. From fright or surprise, the heart always beats violently, so the priestess cannot help here. The girls asked the man to go out and lie down on the massage bed to rest, because he was so tired. Karis walked, but his head was ringing, it was noisy for him, and everything irritated him, as if he were out of his mind. Diarine wanted to know if her ward was okay and tell her that they could finish for today. But she accidentally tripped over a bottle of oil lying on the floor, and the trajectory of her fall tended straight into the bathtub. Karis reacted very quickly, flew up to the falling girl, and managed to put his hand under her head so that she would not break. The man hung over him. At that moment, all the sticky sensations of the oil or someone's presence disappeared for him. He felt only softness and warmth. A loud heartbeat was very close, and the view around him was limited. He didn't hear or see anything else, so he reported an abnormal condition, and Diarine noticed that his entire body was red, and she became worried. The priestess hugged the young man and reassured him with the help of holy power, saying that everything was fine and she had just slipped and there was no threat. Karis still had reddish cheeks, but he could hear the girl's heart beating, and thanks to it, he knew he was safe. The young man calmed down, and Scannell, who had been watching them all this time, made sure that everything was in order, and the priestess was not injured. A few days passed, and the worker got used to the man. She remained unperturbed when he took off his dressing gown. The heroine herself is not yet accustomed to his body, but Scannell showed her professionalism, which is good news. But there was still something that bothered Diarine a little. She had only recently begun to notice it. Scannell has become very cold towards her client, although it used to seem that she consisted only of kindness. But after watching Karis, the heroine realized that he began to feel more comfortable with such an attitude. She wanted to ask the worker why she was so cold to him. She would like her to love this well-behaved dog. But here Diarine will not do anything if the dog is more comfortable when he is ignored and not caressed. Their next procedure was over, and the priestess was still thinking about asking the cosmetologist about the reason for this behavior. She understood that she could not leave it like this, otherwise the problem would worsen, so next time they could have dinner together. As they walked, Scannell called to the priestess as if to attract attention, and she and the man turned. At the sight of Karis, the employee could not say anything, so she simply thanked him for today's work. Then Diarine asks the man to go to the room, and his puppy look did not help him. She just sent him away. After that, she returned to her colleague and asked if she really wanted to say something. Scannell was deeply touched by the insight of Saint Diarine, who immediately understood her feelings. She knew that her words would be noticed, so she invited the girl to lie down and listen to her during the massage. They still have a lot of extra products, so no one will notice if they are used on such a small body. Scannell convinced the girl that this was not a luxury at her expense, but she just wanted to take care of her tired body. The heroine understood that the priestess should be modest and not care about appearance but give love like light, but you can pamper yourself, so she agreed. The girl was pleased that her colleague is a real professional who conducts a consultation before the start. Scannell said that she was the best in the business and agreed to this order because if she copes with it, she can claim to serve the royal family. She has served many young gentlemen and young ladies, but the lord of this house is special. The girl complained that this gentleman did not consider the staff to be people at all, silently showing his dissatisfaction. Diarine said that the young master was just a little talkative, but Scannell knew that the priestess was too kind, so he justified his behavior. Recently, at night, a worker went out at night to drink water, and Karis apparently noticed this while silently watching, and then took the mug from her and told her not to drink. Diarine realized that from the point of view of common sense, it looked strange. No one would think that he came out because he was disturbed by the sound of a drinking person. A colleague said that the hairdresser leaned on a tree during a walk, and the gentleman passing by looked at her as if he wanted to kill her. Scannell went on to talk about the cases with the cook and the guard, but Diarine only thought that her baby was able to survive all this without bloodshed. But at the same time, she understood that there was no sense in a beautiful appearance if the worst of scoundrels lived inside him. Scannell apologized for such a long story. She just wanted to know how the priestess dealt with the scoundrel master and at the same time to talk a little. Diarine didn't mind. She would even like to hear something more about their dog. The facial care was over, and the cosmetologist gave a mirror to examine the result, and also complimented the girl's appearance. The heroine was impressed by such a first-class service, but was even more impressed by her reflection in the mirror. She didn't think she was really that beautiful, and Scannell suggested that she do makeup next time. The next day, Diarine sat with Karis and explained that humans speak human language, which is why they are human. That is why you need to speak like a human, but for now, the way he talks is more like barking. Karis's notoriety spreads throughout the mansion. He has become a capricious, passive-aggressive young master. For Diarine, as a listener, these were very pleasant words, but now she understands well how Karis looks from the outside. Therefore, now they can correct his manner of speech. He already writes letters better than the priestess herself, so now he will learn to compose texts. The heroine does not know aristocratic etiquette very well, since what priests are taught is different from the rule of communication between aristocrats. Therefore, the priestess thought that teaching etiquette was not her task, but it turned out that she would have to teach him at least the basics. The girl decided that they would start by learning the words for the time being. She put a book about a red house in the forest in front of them, and they read the title together. They were close to each other, and Diarine noticed that she was tickled when the man's breath touched her. Karis looked at the girl attentively while she read the book and tucked the strands behind her ear. He was already listening to her poorly, but he continued to look. Suddenly he stopped, and his cheeks flushed. He decided that he had been overtaken by the animal state again. Diarine asked what had happened, and it turned out that Karis did not understand her last words about how eyes can sting from the blue of the sky. The girl tried to explain to him what it was, but after failing, she just decided that they could experience it for themselves. Since the gardener had already arrived, they could go outside, so the priestess took the young man by the hand and dragged him with her. Behind the back gate, it seemed like a beautiful place. While the priestess did not pay attention, a real masterpiece was created here. There were a lot of flowers in this place, and Diarine suggested that we learn their names at the same time. The children held hands and approached the pink arch to admire it, and Karis remembered the name of this thing. He looked up, and in general, this sight fascinated him. The girl asked if it was beautiful here, and the guy remembered another new word for himself. Karis said that flowers are short-lived. That which does not move and is not solid dies easily. The man looked at everything more attentively. His attention was attracted by the sky. He considered it a big and blue world. At this point, Diarine drew attention to herself and said that it was the same feeling as if a cold wind had hit her eyes. True, she forgot that Karis had heightened senses and he could burn his eyes, but he said that there were no deviations. The man was in tears, and he said that his eyes were tingling. The priestess was worried about his condition. Perhaps he has a weakness for the sun due to overnight surgeries. So the girl decided that they would return to the mansion to check and put a compress on his eyes. After that, Karis's vocabulary began to grow rapidly, but the heroine noticed that it was growing a little in a strange direction. The effort of reading books every day quickly paid off, and the young man could now say that chocolate, for example, was sweet. But the priestess could not control his subsequent words, so he immediately says that this smell is as sweet as behind Diarine's ear. The girl explained that you don't need to say that, and you shouldn't smell it behind the ear either, but the young man said that it was just felt. He did not pay attention to her requests not to smell, said that she did not understand that it smelled good. This led the heroine into a slight stupor. It seems that she was given a compliment, but at the same time she feels ignored. She decided that he was just learning to speak, so he probably thinks mainly about his loved ones. That's what she thought, but a few days have passed, and Karis says that the cheesecake on his fork has a sweet smell, like Diarine's body odor. She scolded him and persuaded him. It was not known how long it would last. After such words, she could not eat this dessert now. But Karis easily absorbs it. Then the priestess hands him a plate of cake and asks him to try, but not to compare him with her. The chef did not have the opportunity to experiment due to her busy schedule, so she began to create in this mansion. The priestess herself had not tried the new dish, but she thought that if Karis tried the new taste, she would learn new words. The man ate a small piece, after which he chewed it thoroughly and then said that this pie had a sour taste. Diarine said that he couldn't be rude about food, so he should try and think again, but the guy repeated his words. In general, you can't talk about taste without tasting, and Keres began to talk about his ability to determine what food and when he consumed the object of surveillance, but the girl did not let him finish. She was very angry at the cruel training of the 8th Squad, and after Keres's words, she now involuntarily imagines this picture. Still, Diarine decided to try it too. Perhaps the man expressed himself correctly, although the dessert smells delicious. She resolutely took a bite, and after careful chewing, she opened her eyes in amazement. It was very sweet and delicious. Keres did not understand, but still took the girl by the hand and said that he respected other people's tastes and preferences. The priestess assumed that he had problems with his taste buds, but the guy said that everything was fine with his body. Then they conducted an experiment, as a result of which the cosmetologist was delighted with this cake, and the hairdresser almost vomited. The girl could not even determine what it was. It looked like spoiled food, and then Keres told her that it was a sour taste. The hairdresser completely agreed with him. She had never tried this, but the sensations were exactly like that. But the cosmetologist was not very happy about such speeches, because the cook can be upset. As a result, the hairdresser thanked the gentleman for the accurate description, and he, in turn, agreed that they were both right. The beautician did not understand why they reacted this way, because it was delicious, and the priestess was surprised that Keres's words could even inspire others. While everyone was perplexed, the chef explained that that dessert contains an ingredient for everyone, so everyone feels it differently. The hairmaster was delighted with such an accurate description when the cook said that some people feel a sour taste. The priestess was glad that the master's reputation had risen to that of a gentleman who speaks honestly about taste. After all, honesty is also a virtue, and as if by the way, the girl decided to ask Scanel if she really smelled cheesecake behind her ear. The heroine talked to Lowen, and they decided to give all the staff a 5-day vacation. Keres continued to learn how to communicate with people, and it is also useful to rest to control sensitivity. This vacation was also supposed to please the heroine, but she received a summons from the temple, and she did not want to go there. Keres did not want to let the girl go. He was upset, although she had already told him that she was leaving to be with him. She is calmer in the mansion, but people have things to do, even if they don't want to. Previously, the young man had to do what he was told, regardless of his desires, but now he also had pleasant things. Now it will be more difficult, but sometimes you have to be patient for the sake of good, and Keres said that he does not like these trainings. Diarine has received an invitation from the temple to the festival. She must appear there at least once, so she will have to go. The priestess reminded the man that he should lie quietly in her room, and if the killers came, he should let the guards sort it out. From yesterday to this morning, she had spent a lot of energy trying to convince him, because he didn't want to let her go. The heroine was walking to the carriage. It was also difficult for her to leave Keres and anxiously leave without him. The guards refused to take a vacation for the reason that the killers come regularly, and they need to protect the young master. The assassins were dealt with right at the entrance, but at such moments the priestess had to calm Keres down until everything was settled. Diarine was worried that something would happen to the man, but she would have to let him go someday. Their lives have no points of intersection, and when the heroine thinks about it, it becomes empty in her soul. She reached the temple, where she was greeted by the high priest. She had heard about how the priestess followed the will of the gods with all her heart and soul. The heroine had a premonition that they wanted to entrust her with something strange again, and the woman asked her to sit down because the conversation should not be carried on standing. Diarine was offered a cup of tea because she had come a long way, but she said that compared to the battlefield it was like going to the neighbors. The high priest patted the girl on the shoulder and said that she had no doubt for a second that the priestess Diarine would cope. She firmly believed in her incredible powers, and is so proud of how she glorified the name of the gods even in difficult circumstances. The temple manager had just praised the girl, saying that she was very pleased with how well she had done. It's the right moment to start bargaining, but Diarine isn't in the mood for it. She just wants to get back to the mansion as soon as possible. The woman said that the gods had given them many things so that they could continue to spread their will. This meant that the third prince had given more financial support, as he had promised, and the steward was unconditionally happy about it. Therefore, the woman asks the priestess to continue to work hard until the will of the gods is fully fulfilled. Initially, this plan was started by the third prince, and since the investor is satisfied with the results, it is worth continuing to work well. The heroine does not mind at all, but the high priest does not know what Karis is like now, which means she tells her to spin next to the killing machine for a long, long time. Therefore, Diarine demanded additional payment, saying that the human body often fails to cope with divine plans. The manager said that the fragile body should not be allowed to lack support to carry out the will of the gods, so the temple would take responsibility. The heroine asked if she could visit the Hall of Spells. In this place, it is possible to work miracles, even without divine power. Only selected priests are allowed access to this hall because if everyone could work miracles, no one would go to the temple. The priestess explained that the warrior had traces of a spell on him, and she wanted to check it, and she was allowed to watch as much as she wanted. Therefore, when leaving, the girl said that she would look into the Hall of Spells, pick up the additional fee, and go back. Diarine was accompanied by a priestess, who asked her to follow the rules she had mentioned earlier. There were quite a few books in the hall, which threw the heroine into a little confusion. She tried to find a spell about memories, but did not find it. She realized that she would have to go to the main temple to find a spell that could affect the memories. She can find this later with the help of Loven, but in the meantime she can read a couple of spells that would bring money. Diarine stumbled upon a spell that can get rid of scars, and cosmetology has always been a profitable business. As a result, a few hours later, the priestess's pockets were filled with money, and her head was filled with spells. Passing by the priests, the girl thought that if she hadn't been busy with Karis's affairs, she would have been busy preparing for the festival all night. After all, the heroine was happy with today. Judging by how easily her affairs are resolved, then everything will probably be fine with Karis too. In the carriage, the girl was absorbed in her thoughts, but then she came to her senses and asked the coachman to return to 3rd Avenue. It's one of the busiest streets in the country, and there's no better place to enjoy a festival than this. Driving along this street, the heroine asked to stop for a while near the property of Baron Bredna. Her family's house and Bredna's possessions are very poor. Here the girl is greeted with hugs by her mother. The woman was glad that her daughter now did not need to go to the front, because health and safety are above all. She complained that if Brother Diarine had the same skills as she did, he would at least have distinguished himself in the war. She also said that she could not sit still, afraid that people would think that she was not an aristocrat. Initially, they were a noble family, and the heroine did not understand why she was now in such a state. One day, the great-grandfather of the Bren family discovered poison in a well, so he was awarded baronial lands, although originally it was a peerage without any skills. If the aristocrats do not have merit, then the title of Peroa is taken away from the 5th generation, but if someone from the family proves himself in battle, then his merits are credited to the family. Diarine felt that her mother's words about health and safety were filled with regret, and she knew that her mother was really wanting money. He and his mother are aristocrats, but still every laziness only works, while his father and brother walk with their noses held high. The heroine is used to hiding her true feelings. He tells her mother that she has taken on a difficult job, so she has money. She is a master of saying what others want to hear, because her mother always smiles sincerely after specially selected words. The daughter says that this money is made on her bones, and she will continue to work, to which she received praise in return. The mother said that the girl's brother entered the recitation assembly and was upset. He was the only one who used a fountain pen instead of a glass one. The girl earned this money at the cost of her life, and she was dissatisfied that her mother was going to spend it on some pen. It was a shame that her brother's pride and authority were more important than her life, but her mother said she was just saying that Diarine had earned a lot. The heroine decided that it was time for her to leave, and her mother tried to stop her by saying that her brother would come soon, and they could eat together. But the girl said that she was not here for long, so she had to hurry, and just on the way out she bumped into her brother. The man was dissatisfied with her good manners. He believed that she was a low-class person and should maintain respect for the family. Diarine apologized to him without a trace of sincerity and hurried to the carriage under her mother's displeased remarks. She wanted to get rid of the sight of this dirty house, although she knew perfectly well that she would definitely return here. The girl was planted at the will of the forest. She knew that if she went to the very depths of this forest, there would be a mansion. And while she is going there, she can cry quietly alone. She is very upset by this situation. Diarine decided that she would only cry until she entered the mansion, and when she entered, she would wash herself with warm water and put it all out of her mind. Returning to the mansion, she will once again become a priestess who has no family or status, and will no longer be that sad baroness. The mansion was still a long way off, so she kept walking and shedding tears along the way. But unexpectedly, she ran into Karis. After a short silence, the girl began to worry that something had happened to him, but he said that he just heard a sound. Diarine apologized for crying loudly. She was an adult and she had to work, even though her tears had already dried thanks to the man. But Karis did not agree with her, because he came out not because of the noise, but because he heard Diarine crying. The girl looked at him in bewilderment. She asked why he ran out when she heard her crying. She suggested that he did not like it or was annoyed by it, but Karis denied these options. Then she decided that if he was not noisy and not annoyed, then perhaps he was surprised, and then the guy agreed. He must have gone out to see if something had happened while she was crying, and the girl assured him that everything was fine. The man again did not speak to her, said that he was surprised and ran out because he heard her crying. Diarine was already standing with her head down, her ears slightly red at the thought that she had tamed Karis. She involuntarily remembered her mother's words that she was crying over a trifle, so she decided that the man also came out because of a trifle. But she immediately stopped and apologized. Because you can't say that, she said that she would go to the mansion and try to be quiet. The girl took a step forward as the young man embraces her and announces that her heart is beating hard and she is excited. He told her that everything was fine and she was safe, as Diarine herself always did when Karis was worried. The man held her with the right force, and she felt all the warmth of the hug. It was even better after she hugged him back. After that, the heroine cried for a long time, but now everything is fine, although her eyes were swollen. The girl offered to return to the mansion in time for dinner, and also said that Karis was very kind. He doesn't ask anything, waits for her to cry, retreats when she pushes her away, and then he should be called kind and affectionate. Now he relies on the priestess and studies, and the heroine knows that one day he will become a master, and everyone will want to rely on him. And someone might be comforted by him, as she was now, so Diarine asked that Karis not be a rude gentleman. I asked him to be kind and affectionate, so that you could feel warmth and comfort next to him, as if under the rays of the sun. Now Karis probably does not understand what this means, but he agreed with the girl, and she is sure that everything will be so. The mansion was quiet and peaceful. The difference between the presence of people and their absence was felt. It was so quiet that the heroine even heard flies beating on the window, and Karis even reported that there were only 3 of them. He said that one fly is with them and the other 2 are in different rooms that are located far from each other. Diarine was surprised that his hearing was still not dulled, and now he was able to catch the annoying fly with one hand. The girl was worried about how he endured all this and asked if the beating of her heart bothered him, but the young man replied that everything was fine. At this time, 2 flies flew into the room together, but they did not live here long because Karis killed the 2 of them with one pillow. Only a couple of months have passed. Initially, the heroine was preparing to live like this for several years, but it turns out everything can end faster. Suddenly, there was a pop of fireworks, which frightened Diarine. She congratulated the second prince on his birthday. The girl made sure that Karis was all right, but still assumed that he had a delayed attack or temporary deafness. She said that the sound is very similar to boom explosions, and if it is hard for a man, then he should not endure. But he replied that everything was fine, and there were no problems because when Diarine was around, everything was fine. The priestess noticed that Karis had not been agitated or anxious lately. This may mean that he can live like an ordinary person without her, but the man did not understand what ordinary meant. The girl explained that this means not to kill people because of noise, calmly answer questions, not to rampage, and so on. And then Karis replied that it was impossible because it was possible only when Diarine was around. The heroine was worried that she would be kicked out. But then she came to her senses and reminded herself that when the work was over, she would happily return and receive a promotion with a bonus. She had an idea, but first she received confirmation from the guy that he feels good in any situation if she is around. The girl thought that right now there should be a lot of people on the streets because of the holiday. There are songs, performances, and so on. People in a festive mood talk to everyone they meet, and this is an ideal opportunity to practice social communication. So Dairon suggested that Karis go and see the festival, as he had only read about them in books. When she said that there would be a lot of people and noisy, his interest immediately decreased significantly. The girl offered to go as a training, because when Karis in the person of the gentleman went to the ball, she would not be around. The man was unhappy that she would not be at the balls, although it would be strange if the priest went to such events. Darren would like him to have at least one pleasant memory, because then it will be difficult to live carefree and joyful. Therefore, she urged him to go have a good time that he can remember in such moments. All this time, Karis looked at the girl's smile. She fascinated him so much that he forgot what she was talking about. The heroine went to the dressing room. It was finally time to put on the clothes that the tailor had sewn for them. In a ceremonial suit, Karis looks amazing. In this form, he can be taken to the imperial ball. In his armor, he looked quite elegant, and one could even think that the war had begun again. Even just choosing the colors made him look even more attractive, but for some reason, Dairon thinks that something can happen. Therefore, the girl suggested that he wear a white shirt. He looks so good that he looks perfect in everything. The heroine wanted to dress up brighter, but since they are going to a village festival, it is better to restrain herself. She approved of the image of Karis, reminded him to change his pants, and said that she would also quickly pack up and go out. The girl was choosing an outfit. She had not gone out in anything other than priestly clothes for a long time, but now she had a chance to fix it. After some time, she was ready. She was wearing a beautiful airy dress and heels. Everything in the image was beautiful and restrained. Dairon hoped that she had attached the ribbon to her hair correctly. It was given to her by the seamstress when there was some fabric left. Karis's voice came from behind the door, and the priestess said that he had come just in time so he could enter. The young man does not have special beauty criteria, so the girl does not know whether it makes sense to ask him what she looks like. After a moment of standing still, he walked over to Dairon and gently reached for her ribbon above her ear. After that, he said aloud that he seemed to be watching a flower bloom. The girl was surprised but interested. Then he continued that the bud is beautiful, but the process of opening is amazing, and when it opens, it is beautiful. The priestess thanked him for such a compliment but asked him not to exaggerate so much, but Karis disagreed. He said what he felt, as Dairon herself taught. She is a really good teacher. She herself once told him to remember what he read in books to express his feelings. Therefore, the man continued his speech about how the priestess looked like a flower in his eyes. The girl could no longer cope with the rapid reddening of her face. In front of her stood a sinful young man who would turn high society upside down. The heroine apologizes to all the future ladies in advance, because she raised this child too perfectly. Dairon was able to bring herself to her senses, after which, showing her determination, she said that it was time for them to go. When the heroine is dressed as a priestess, she plays the role of a servant of God, and since the expectations of others cannot be completely ignored, she has to take care of her appearance. And when she is on vacation in ordinary clothes and at home, it is much more uncomfortable for her to fit into the role of a bag of money. But now she was not a priestess of Dairon, nor was she a Dairon of Baron Bradna's family. She could breathe deeply. The heroine thought that it would be good to get it from Lovin first before going out, but then decided that this could be dealt with later. Dairon knew that the mansion was well protected, but the surveillance was quite tough for protection, so she asked Karis how many people were watching the mansion. He replied that there were about 30 of them, 6 more guards behind the building and at the entrance, which was quite a lot. The priestess asked if Karis could deceive them, and without further ado, he picked up the girl in his arms. He said that he was ready to start implementing the plan. The girl only hoped that everything would be fine. About an hour later, they got out into the forest, and the priestess praised the young man for the work he had done, although he believed that they had wasted their time. But Dairon assured him that everything was fine, because they had plenty of time. They only needed to return before evening. If you went towards the lake, there should be carts, so Dairon suggested catching one and driving to the holiday street. In the conversation that followed, it turned out that when Karis usually rode in a wagon, he was deeply sedated or stunned. With such information, the priestess does not know if he has seasickness. She explained to him what it was and asked him to let her know if he felt anything. Soon they came across a coachman with a wagon, and he was ready to lead them into the festive street. Diren took Karis by the hand and led him along. She thought that this walk would be just pleasant and ordinary. The coachman told them that if they left now, they would have time to see the procession of His Highness the Second Prince. The girl was pleasantly excited, but it turned out that this walk was doomed to be full of surprises from the very beginning to the end. During the ride in the wagon, Karis was not feeling well, and Diren tried to get his attention to figure out what was going on. He did not understand what was wrong with him. In the current situation, he did not feel unbearable stimuli. He felt that his breathing was disturbed and his pulse was rapid. He had a feeling of threat, but he did not understand what it was. He didn't understand anything. His thoughts moved erratically. He thought about the acrid smoke, about the screams, about the approaching bodies. Diren shouted his name and asked him to come to his senses, but he couldn't. He was in a panic, and the girl continued to hold his face with both hands. Karis convinced himself that this was not reality, but only the warmth of his hand on his face was real, but he could not get out of his state. The priestess did not know that he might be getting motion sickness, so she looked out of the window and asked the coachman to stop the carriage. Both went outside, and the man immediately grabbed the girl in his arms. This is a little different from ordinary attacks. Karis was trembling and making snatches, and then Diren realized that he was just frightened. The priestess poured holy strength into him so that he would come to his senses. She did not know in what fear he was wandering, but asked him to return to reality. Karis involuntarily remembered how in his childhood he sat in some closed cart, blindfolded, hand-folded, and legged. Some people stole it and wanted to sell it. One of the men offered to give him the medicine first, and you can sell it when they get the money. Then this man grabbed the boy by the hair, poured liquid into him, after which he fell asleep. The man asked what his name was. For them, his name was too long, and it was like confirmation for them that he was really one of the nobles. Suddenly, Karis began to come to his senses. He heard Diren's voice. She said that this was not a battlefield, and it was safe here. The girl was very glad that he woke up. She wiped her tear and asked if he was okay. The man was silent. He felt that something was missing, and at that moment, the priestess took his face in her hands. She said that the carriage was no more. They had paid and sent it back. Karis seemed to be listening to her with half an ear because he was carried away by her hands. He felt comfort in her arms. He was clearly better. He took the girl's hands and put them on his head. With all his appearance, he begged her for more caresses, and Diren gave in to such pressure, so she patted him on the head. The young man asked to make more glitter, referring to her holy power, but the priestess said that it could not be done just like that. She repeated that you can't do it just at random, but Karis believed that this one was like the very moment. Diren was surprised that this dog had learned to bark, but decided that if he could make a reservation, then everything was fine. She knows that they should not get into the carriage, so they will go on foot and must be in time before nightfall. But the priestess could not finish the end. She staggered and could have fallen if Karis had not caught her. She had used too much saint power, and now she had no strength, she was dizzy, and it would be nice for her to eat something. Karis suddenly threw the girl around his neck and said that he could carry her, but the priestess forbade her. She said that he should remember her human dignity and should at least carry her as a person, and not a sack of potatoes. In the first version, Karis put Diren on his shoulder, but she is no longer so young for this, so it is not suitable. In the second version, he took her under his knees, holding her back, but this position is too intimate. In the third version, he simply held the girl in front of him, and in this position she lacked only some kind of sign. Karis no longer knew what to do, and Diren apologized and offered to carry herself on her back. The priestess decided that he was still afraid to turn his back on people, but he said that if it was Diren, then it was fine. He calmly turned his back to her, and the heroine remembered that earlier it was necessary to risk her life for this. She climbed on it and repeated to the man that you can't just carry anyone on your back, only very special people. But then she corrected herself and told him not to do this to anyone in the future, because a young master is not supposed to do that, and today is a special day. They reached the festive streets faster than they expected, but there they were bombarded with embarrassing words. Everyone around them decided that they had come here as lovers. They thought they were a beautiful couple, and everyone was interested in how they found each other because they look very nice together. The cook who threw these embarrassing words was very glad that the guys chose him for the first date. Karis and Diarin have just arrived and have already found themselves in an awkward situation where this felling promises everyone a big discount if they start dating. After a while, they ceased to show such interest in them, and they ate sweets. Thanks to the sugar, the priestess felt better. Usually, such a delicacy is eaten on special occasions, and compared to the one in the mansion, it is just sweet junk food. Karis wondered if Diarin liked this food, but it was the first time she had tasted it. Since in childhood she was busy with her responsibilities, and now she was able to afford such an adult luxury. Her parents rarely bought this, because one piece already bores due to the strong sweetness, and some children just throw it on the ground because they don't want to eat it anymore. The priestess understands that the young master does not need this information, but the more honey mushrooms, the better. Karis agreed with her, because the amount of experience directly affects the chances of winning. By this time, he had already finished his lasha. He liked this sweet. The girl honored him for being able to eat completely, but he was already looking at the lasha in her hand. The girl offered her horn, and the young man took her hand and leaned forward to bite. Diarin said that you can't do this on the street, but at the sight of the expression on his face, all the reproaches instantly evaporated. Her whole face flushed with embarrassment, but she was glad that everyone around her was busy and not paying attention to them. The horn had already disappeared from her hand, and Karis had almost eaten it, so she asked him if he agreed that after a good meal there was energy. Well, since they came out, then such a chance should not be missed, so the priestess girl offered to try all the street snacks. She took his hand and led him, her attention quickly shifting to all the food stalls. After a while, the guys were already sitting on a bench with full bellies. In childhood, Diarin could not even dream of this. But today, thanks to money, she tried everything. Karis heard a new word for himself. It turned out that he did not know what money was. The priestess asked him to give her his hand, and he put his paw in like a dog, but then the girl corrected him to turn him palm up. She poured coins into his hand and explained that 100 copper coins are equal to 1 silver coin, and 10 silver coins are equal to 1 gold coin. The young man looked at the money fascinated. It was explained to him that in order to get what you want, you need to pay a certain amount. Like a puppy, he was happy with his idea and decided that Diarin could also be bought, but he was forbidden. Initially, people cannot be bought or sold, although the heroine herself agreed to a business trip when she was offered more money. Karis did not like this situation. Now he urgently needed to find out how to get Diarin in such a case. The girl was confused at first, but then explained that she was a priestess, and her life was dedicated only to God. She cannot dispose of her life, so the young man suggested that he could ask God to give the girl away. But he cannot do this, especially since he does not have a single coin for this, and now he is upset by this fact. But it's strange that he doesn't have money, because he fought so much. The heroine will definitely ask Loven about it someday. The girl got up from the bench. Since they were talking about money, she could teach Karis how to spend it. Here they can buy almost anything, so she suggested going to any store and looking for what the young man would like to buy. The guys saw how a crowd of people began to gather. Everyone was very happy and waited for the prince himself to appear. The heroine remembered that they had already been told that the prince would participate in the night parade. The troops of the second prince will also participate in the parade, according to rumors. It was they who broke through the defenses of Solvin Castle in the war. But some remember that the 8th Squad broke through the defenses, but in any case, the troops of the second prince will participate in the parade. Finally, the second prince himself appeared, and looking at him, Diarin had a strange feeling of déjà vu. She felt as if she had seen the underside of something, as if she had accidentally opened the curtain backstage. Even if she could explain, she still thinks it's better to keep quiet, but this man is very similar to the third prince. The heroine wondered if the second prince became the heir, then it would be difficult for the third prince and princess. But she immediately tried to get rid of these thoughts because she shouldn't meddle in other people's business. She asked Karis what kind of life he would like to live, and in response she received that he would become a young master. But Diarin didn't mean what he should do, she meant what he wanted. But then the thought came to her. She informed the young man that when he became a young master, they would have to separate. After a pause, she continued that he really should think about his own life. The heroine already knows that with experience in society, a person develops skills to maintain mental health. If you pretend that you do not hear and do not see, then you can prevent more than half of the problems in society. The girl has long come to the conclusion that the less you know, the more vague your opinion, the less inconvenience there is in life. But she does not know if this is right, because now she is teaching Karis to think for himself. She would like him to have a lot of things that he likes, so that he can live as he sees fit. Although she herself does not succeed in this, in the end, this person will live in another world. And now Karis is standing in front of her. He has a very sad puppy face, because he decided that Dairon was leaving him. The girl hastened to deny everything, because if it were so, then she would look like a terrible person. If you think logically, she did not pick him up to throw, but apparently for the puppy it is the same thing. If Karis wants to become a real master, he will have to part with her, but he believes that even if he does, he will live with Dairon. When the girl asked who said this to him, he froze in shock at that moment, and she realized that she had gone too far. She tried to explain that it was not that she wanted to live alone, but that she simply could not be with him. The young man understood and concluded that Dairon wanted, but could not continue to live with him. The girl praised him and reminded him that she was a priestess, and here she was temporary, since priestesses had to live in the temple. She did not think that Karis was ready to go so far, but he said that then he too would become a priest. In general, such a position sounds good for him. If he says that he resolves of his bloody sins, the story will be perfect. But now was not the time to think about it. Dairon had to dispel those illusions, so she explained that even if he became a priest, they still wouldn't have time to see each other because of work. She can't quit this job because money can't solve everything, but without it, nothing will work. And now they have enough money to have fun. When Karis starts spending, he understands why he needs money. Therefore, the girl smiled and, showing a bag of coins, urged the young man to continue spending money. A little later, their wallet was already empty. Dairon was sitting on the bench, tired and hugging the purchase purchased only for her. In each store, Karis behaved in the same way, sprinkled the girl with compliments that were associated with flowers. He distinguished himself most of all in a cosmetics store, where an employee offered to take blush, which is very popular with them. Karis did not know what they were, and it was explained to him that they were applied to the lips to make their color brighter. The worker brought him a blush for him to look at and told him to dip his finger and put it on his lips. The man dipped his finger in the rouge, then approached Dairon and warned her that he was about to apply it. In his eyes, her lips looked like a bouquet in bloom, and he wanted to keep touching them. He voiced all these thoughts aloud, which made not only Dairon, but also the store employee very embarrassed. While the heroine was stunned by this psychic attack, everything turned out to be such that their wallet is now empty. She had to teach the young man a lesson, so she asked what they should do now because the money had run out. He bought unnecessary things and nothing for himself, which is why money needs to be spent systematically and carefully. But Karis did not agree with her. He wanted to buy all this. He was pleased, so it was useful. He took a transparent patterned scarf from the bag and said that he liked watching Dairon wear it. The man reached out to the girl to put this scarf on her, and she tried her best not to look up at him. It's nice that Dairon comes first, but it's unknown if this will remain the case when he meets more people and gains experience. Therefore, the heroine must control herself. Otherwise, if she gives in to feelings, then she will suffer alone. And the young man finished with the scarf. He stepped back to look at the result of the work, and he liked it very much. Dairon thought that since she couldn't completely give up her feelings, she shouldn't be too tight. Therefore, she continued to communicate nicely with him, praised him for how quickly he learns, and herself for her beauty. The girl was so distracted that she didn't really look at what they bought, so she reached for the bags. The man was pleased with her interest. He himself began to take things out and show them to the priestess. The girl was lost in her thoughts, but Karis had already knelt down to put on his shoes, thus showing manners. She didn't know what kind of nonsense he was talking about, but he approached her feet and said they looked like sweet marshmallows. As a result, Karis put on the girl another shawl with gloves, and she was holding a bag in her hands. It was clear to her, even without a mirror, that she looked insanely pretentious. But the man was so happy that you can't say anything, so the heroine decided that she would have fun at the holiday. She saw that musicians had come and explained to Karis that they were people who played music on instruments. When music is played, people move to the beat of the melody, and on holidays it creates an atmosphere of fun. Diarine held out her hand to the young man and asked if he would like to try dancing, to which he agreed. Karis looked carefully at the other people, then pulled the girl closer to him by the waist and began to dance. The priestess did not understand why he offered to dance if he could not do it, but it would definitely come in handy at the ball. Although she does not know much about it, it seems to her that the man is very good at it, which seems suspicious. Because you can't immediately learn movements just by observing and repeating others. And judging by the way he leads her, although she does not know how to dance at all, Karis studied as a child, which means that he was a nobleman. No matter how difficult the circumstances of the nobles are, even if they go bankrupt, they will simply become poorer, and selling them into slavery on the battlefield seems very strange. Diarine asked the young man if he wanted to remember his childhood, but he hadn't thought about it, and he didn't know if it was necessary. The girl replied that he did not need to remember it, but perhaps he wanted to know about his parents and family. No matter how angry the heroine is with her family, she cannot completely abandon it because she is afraid of being left all alone. She asked Karis if I was not afraid to eat alone, to which he immediately and directly answered in the negative. The priestess began to say that she often thought about her family and wanted to say something else, but suddenly they heard someone's loud voice. A man confessed his love to a girl and that she had become the whole world for him. This daredevil, he decided to make a marriage proposal in public and was already on one knee in front of his beloved. But the girl refused him. She had politely refused him before and hinted that he should stop, but he never understood. She was infuriated by this situation, so she turned around and walked away, and people in the crowd began to talk and comment. The heroine was even a little sorry for this man, but here he is to blame, because the proposal is usually made to someone with whom the wedding has already been agreed. The priestess told Karis that this case is a great example of how relationships between people do not always turn out the way they would like. Karis was interested in the topic of marriage. He suggested that if that woman had accepted the proposal, then they would always have been together. Diarine agreed with him, but added that before proposing, you need to make sure that your partner is ready for it. The man turned to the heroine and made such a pleading face in which his desire was visible, and the girl realized that she had fallen into a trap. As a result, she almost ran away from him while he followed her, calling her name and kept asking why she did not agree. The girl thanked Karis for catching her when she broke her heel, but the priest's life belongs to a god. The heroine took off all her outfits, and she felt much better after all. It is not easy to dress up like this all the time. She thought that the man had already calmed down, but he had come up with the idea of defeating the god, and he needed to know if he was good at fighting. Diarine was stunned, but tried to explain that the god was the strongest in the world, and to fight him you had to die. Then the man asked if she could quit the service if he brought a lot of money, and he could get it. The heroine understands that this will clearly increase money, since he will soon become a young gentleman on the state payroll. And in general, this is very tempting for her, because then she will have a rich and beautiful faithful dog who looks only at her. But she already knows something from other people's experience when the young master showed interest in her roommate. The heroine had already made a list of tricks about him, and the neighbors said that the young gentleman was a cheater who was hiding his wedding ring. Therefore, these girls now know for sure that there are no beautiful and rich people who love one person. And the heroine, who does not have a penny behind her back, needs to be especially careful. So now she tells Karis that it is not easy to give up her life's work. She explained that in addition to money and trust, you need another reason, and it is more important than the above. Diarine has no reason to leave the service. She likes to be a priestess. There are difficulties in any business, but she is happy with her place. Thus, the young man summed up that in order to marry him, the girl needs to give up this life, but there is no reason for this. Karis remembered that the man had shouted that he loved that woman, and that might be the reason for marriage. Diarine hesitantly agreed with him, because usually proposals are made to someone who is loved, but Karis does not know what love is, so he asked. The heroine herself does not know what it is. She thought that she would never have to think about it. The girl urged herself to calm down. It was not the first time she had to explain something to the children, so she would cope. The priestess said that love can be compared to care from God. It is a warm, soft, and tender feeling. But for Karis, these are two abstract concepts, but he suggested that love is comparable to action. Therefore, he asked how to make love then, and at this point, the heroine decided to throw her pride to hell. She turned away to continue on her way, and directly said that she did not know because she had never tried it herself. Having calmed down a little, she explained that love cannot be done on purpose, it comes by itself. A person cannot control the beating of the heart. The same happens with love. It comes imperceptibly and naturally. Karis suddenly had the idea that love is like a status effect, which should have symptoms, like a rapid heartbeat when excited. The priestess agreed with him, said that everyone is different, but at the sight of a person the heart beats faster and the face turns red. A person always wants to be close and look. Such feelings the priestess observed at the confession of parishioners in the temple. Karis listened to the girl all this time, and when fireworks began to explode in the sky, she said that she loved Diarene. She laughed and said that it was not love, and then warned him not to regret such words in the future. They continued on their way, and Karis thought that his gaze fixed on the girl and his smile that appeared involuntarily might all be temporary. Suddenly, unexpectedly, the man smelled blood, and at the same moment an explosion occurred not far from them. The heroine was very frightened. She did not understand what was happening, because there was only their mansion ahead.